high, and that we probably haven't gotten to the bottom of how to measure and how to assess the full impact of the virus. And as such, it was interesting. The market has been very much looking at using a similar model that has worked for the SARS epidemic, because there indeed the peak of new cases has actually kind of led or triggered the rebound in markets, because then you start the assessment on when all the manufacturing capability can reopen, and as such then you can start assessing the economic impact, which obviously then leads the market. And with that up in the air, it obviously now it feels a bit like back to square one, and we need a few more kind of days of data points to see whether we have a better picture or not.
Now, obviously, this is first and foremost a human tragedy. We shouldn't ignore that fact.
Yes.
Not just about the economic opportunities that are there, but equally, it clearly does have a specific impact in specific areas. And I guess people like yourself are now assessing where is it that this is going to be seen most dramatically. I mean, what sectors do you think?
I think we had the news this morning. Look at the travel sector, or the leisure travel holiday bookings. The more pictures we get from that cruise ship, I guess will have a very, very negative impact on bookings. And as such, there's very obvious cases or sectors and areas of the markets where this will have quite a negative impact. And for these sectors in particular, the news of this morning means just prolonged uncertainty, and people saying, oh, if that's the case and we don't even know where we stand, this will probably have a more and a deeper impact. We had obviously some of the spirit makers this morning saying, okay, we have to see what the impact is, particularly those where they have large operations in China or across Asia. So again, an area of consumer demand, consumption levels will be impacted. What's less clear so far is really the impact on global supply chains. So far, we haven't heard really, other than obviously the immediate impact on capacity being shut in China. It's very unclear yet on how this will have ripple effects across the global economy. And there, I think, quite rightly, CEOs are quite, hesitant to give a full prognosis on what they see.
Now, yesterday we had the Euro area industrial output figures posting the steepest drop in almost 4 years. Deutsche Bank saying that they now expect a slight contraction for Germany in the fourth quarter. I mean, how much of that is to be blamed really on the virus, obviously, given that Germany is so outward looking?
Obviously that's backward looking, so nothing, in fact, which is quite telling, because it means, and it's a good reflection on how weak the manufacturing actually has been throughout 2019, which was far more related to the trade negotiations, which interestingly do not feature any longer in any headlines, when in fact, yes, we have had obviously the first part of the deal signed, but we still haven't seen a continuation of those negotiations to potentially think about a phase two. We have the US elections coming up. So the weakness in the manufacturing sector was mostly related to uncertainty around, obviously, the trade relationships and the health of the global economy. And now we have to think about the coronavirus adding to that weakness rather than helping it. So this will most likely come in addition. So what we hear today around the fourth quarter is obviously quite telling on what we should expect now with the coronavirus for Q1, Q2 this year.
And I guess a big part of that is automakers, because Germany obviously tied very strongly. We had these very dramatic figures from China this morning about auto sales and car sales and how bad that's going. I mean, is that where we are likely to see, do you think, the most dramatic effect in Europe because of the German link there?
Europe overall obviously is very much tied into the global manufacturing cycle, and as such, autos, yes, is always a very easy one because it's a very transparent value chain. And there we should not forget, it's not just obviously what's happening in terms of the virus or obviously the weakness in the manufacturing sector, but the change in demand patterns and the whole idea that Tesla now is obviously larger in terms of market cap than some of the big old traditional car makers. So there you have again another long-term structural change in demand patterns that hits a sector that then on top will see weakness from the manufacturing capabilities. So very interesting, lots of kind of cross implications for those car manufacturers.
On something completely different, we've been talking about BP, the pledge to net zero by 2050 in terms of climate change. Quite a seismic move. Also has received criticism and doesn't seem to have worried shareholders yet, but we don't have the details. Does it make you rethink when oil majors are making these significant pledges around climate change?
I believe they have at least put the line in the sand. And I think what we would increasingly expect is that there is an understanding of the role that the big oil manufacturers are playing in the energy transition. And nobody can blame them that there's not sufficient detail yet, because as we know, having a scenario analysis of the profound changes that the energy system will have to go through, we can't model with kind of any precision at this point. Hence, the boldness and the understanding what role they have to play, I think, is a first very, very important step. And there will be changes simply because there will be regulatory changes, there will be policy changes, there will be, there's so many moving parts. So for them to at least have an end goal and say, okay, we will have to readjust, but we are part of the journey, I think is a very important first statement to make.
Sonia, thank you very much. Sonia Lauder, CIO at Legal and General Investment Management. And coming up in the next hour, Naira Chehich will join me. We'll be speaking to Helen Bradshaw, Portfolio Manager at Quilter Investors, again reflecting on the impact of the virus on the global economy, where it's going. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL. Every journey matters.
For up to 50% off selected floors and beds, and up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
Middle of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe for this Thursday, February the 13th in London. Coming up this hour.
Revised counting methods show a big surge in the official number of deaths and infections from coronavirus in China, as Beijing dismisses top officials in the province at the centre of the outbreak.
A new era begins. Credit Suisse's new chief executive says he'll adhere to the course set by the board. This after the group misses the mark on net income for the fourth quarter. We'll hear from our interview with outgoing CEO Tidjane Thiam.
Fears grow as the coronavirus spreads around a quarantine cruise ship in Japan, and Prime Minister Boris Johnson is reshuffling his cabinet with women set for junior jobs. I'm Leanne Gerrans with World News.
And Jess Staley insists he's been transparent about his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. We'll bring you our exclusive interview with Barclays CEO.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington DC, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
And a very good morning from London. I'm Roger Hearing.
And I'm Naira Chehich. Good morning, everyone. It is coming up to 8:01 a.m. in London, 9:01 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. And Roger, big banks reporting today. These are going to be some of the main stocks to watch as the market gets underway. Of course, with Credit Suisse, it's the final results for Tidjane Thiam as CEO as he's handing over the reins to Thomas Gottstein. There's a TLIV blog that you can follow with all the details. And basically, as we said in the headlines, and that it was a miss on that fourth quarter net income. The pre-tax loss at the investment bank was bigger than expected, but revenues improved during 2019 after a challenging first quarter. Thiam talked about a flying start to this year. And then, of course, it's the profitability that's a big focus of the market, and Credit Suisse aiming to lift that return on tangible equity by 175 basis points in 2020. So the way that the TLIV blog is kind of characterizing this is that Thiam presented a mixed set of numbers at the end of a turbulent 4 years in charge, while claiming credit for engineering a successful turnaround. That pre-tax loss at the investment bank, bigger than expected. A rebound in profit in the global markets business didn't quite match forecasts. Tiam speaking to us in his interview saying that Credit Suisse is in good hands with incoming CEO Thomas Gottstein, who of course is a 20-year veteran of the bank. And of course he was asked if there are any more spying scandals brewing, and he said, I don't know that I know of any, but I don't know if there are any. So that's some of the takeaways from Credit Suisse. We'll hear more from that interview as the hour goes on. And then Barclays.
Yes, and interestingly, their reputational issues came up as well. Jess Staley being asked about his links to Jeffrey Epstein, saying that that's something, in a sense, he didn't really want to talk about, but it's out there at the moment, and a lot to talk about that. We're also getting a redhead across the terminal now. Nissan seeing their full-year operating income, 85 billion yen. It had been predicted 150 billion.
Just to come back to Barclays, though, so to come back to the numbers as well, of course, a lot of the focus now is on that FCA investigation of the Staley and Epstein relationship. But Staley, as you say, said he has Barclays board confidence. CIB revenue missed in the fourth quarter. The 2020 return on tangible equity target of over 10%, seen as challenging to achieve. Barclays managed to hit that key profit target of 9% return on tangible equity for 2019. It's stuck to the 2020 target of 10%, but again, the comment is that it will be challenging. So that's some of the details there coming through. I'm still waiting really to get any share price reaction from both of these. Here we go. Barclays is opening down 3%. So we've got an opening price for Barclays. For Credit Suisse, still waiting for that to come through. But elsewhere, what we're focusing on as well, Roger, is coronavirus, because this week we've seen really quite a lot of risk on cross-asset, reflected cross-asset, not just in equities, on this idea that there might be an inflection point, a stabilization in the infection rate. Then we hear the methodologies change, and that actually is not the case.
This is a major change because they are looking at it in different ways of assessing the numbers. But I think the problem in the markets is a sense that maybe as things change, we're not completely convinced that we know the full extent of this, because it keeps seeming to change in terms of the day or whatever. Are we getting the full picture from the Chinese government? Unless we do, people won't feel confident about investment decisions.
Well, there's two ways of looking at this, right? So you could either, and today the market is taking a cautious tone cross assets, that's the first reaction. But you could either look at this as, oh, we're not really sure that the inflection rate's stabilizing, that's a bad thing. Or you could say, well, maybe now we're getting a more realistic picture, and that's the beginning of that, and that's the optimistic view. We'll see what the market takes beyond today, but those are sort of the two ways of looking at it. In the UK as well?
Well, yes, one other thing, it's reshuffle day. In fact, we should expect quite soon some perhaps happy or indeed sad faces to be coming out of the entrance to Downing Street as people learn whether or not they're keeping their jobs. We're not expecting major change. The general perspective is that Sajid Javid, the Chancellor, will keep his job. Others, well, bit of a question mark.
To get to the markets then, 5 minutes into the equity market open, some red on the screen in Asia after 2 days of gains. We're also seeing the Stock 600 open lower as futures were indicating. So after 3 days in the green, we're down 0.4% on Europe's equity benchmark. Global equities hit a record yesterday. Looking across European indices, FTSE 100 down almost 0.7%, the CAC 40 down 0.4%, the DAX down by the same, the IBEX and FTSE MIB in the red. The Dow and S&P hit records yesterday, but futures on the back foot. Dow, S&P and Nasdaq futures all lower by at least 0.4%. Nasdaq futures leading the losses. And we were talking about equity exceptionalism earlier this week, in the sense that equities keep gaining, whereas other markets like rates and commodity prices reflecting more concern about the coronavirus impact. But today, it really is caution cross assets. So equities lower, the 10-year Treasury yield down 5 basis points, approaching a 158 handle. The 10-year Bund yield down 2 basis points at almost negative 40. 10-year gilt yield moves lower as well. In FX, the yen is bid. Commodity currencies have come under pressure. The euro yesterday hit a 2017 low. We had industrial production data causing concern. You've got Deutsche Bank talking about concerns around the fourth quarter for Germany, the risk of recession, and you've got more and more strategists revising their forecasts for euro dollar, although the consensus view on a Bloomberg survey is still 115 year end. We'll see if that changes. 108.81 is where we trade right now. Oil's been interesting. because it's been on the front foot for a lot of this week, even with higher inventories in the US, but it is moving lower now. It fluctuated in the Asian session. WTI down 0.4%, 50.99. Brent at 55.44, down 0.6%, Roger.
And let me bring you one bit more detail. I was giving you the Nissan redhead earlier about the fact that its full year operating income, 85 billion yen, saw 150 billion. There was also a loss, third quarter loss, 26.09 billion yen. The estimate was a profit of 47.48 billion, and they are saying they will not pay their year-end dividend. Anyway, let me give you what the stocks are to watch this morning, because Bloomberg's Morwenna Coniam joins us down the line from our London bureau. So first of all, Morwenna, Pernod Ricard, they've been cutting their forecast.
They have. They actually cut their forecast by about half today. As many companies have been facing a challenge from coronavirus. Now, Pernod is the largest seller of international spirits in China. They're the maker of things like Jameson whiskey from Ireland and Beefeater. So that's going to potentially, take a big hit in that region. They now estimate the impact from the virus to be about 2% of their full year sales and about 3% of earnings. And they've reduced their forecast for profit from recurring operations by about half to 2 to 40%. That's despite a stronger than expected performance before December.
Now, ThyssenKrupp, they say their elevator sales imminent as their losses mount.
Yes, they are struggling on the debt front, it seems. Debt rose and losses deepened this quarter, so they really do need to sell that elevator business as a consensus. Their earnings were mixed, but they did, and they reiterated their forecast, but analysts are pointing to the fact that really to meet that, they're going to have to increase their profits quite sharply, so it will be interesting to see how that elevator sale goes.
And finally, Airbus. Now, their 2019 results good. The 2020 outlook, however, may underwhelm. That's according to analysts.
Yes, so they did report earnings that narrowly beat estimates, but the guidance isn't looking quite so sunny. However, the real news today is they increased their stake in their A320 jetliner to 75% from about 50%, and really looking to capitalize on that single aisle plane market where they're already sold out, and their rival Boeing, the equivalent is the 737 MAX, which is grounded and doesn't look like it's coming back for the middle of the year, so they're looking to capitalize on that.
All right, thanks very much indeed. That was Morwenna Coniam there talking about shares to watch this morning.
Let's take a check on Nestle shares as well. Of course, Nestle pushed back its target for sales growth with revenue from China slowing. Now, this was even before the outbreak of the novel coronavirus. And in terms of the commentary on the coronavirus that came through, was basically to the tune that it's too early to really assess the impact. Nestle shares down 2.2% in today's session. And speaking of coronavirus, Roger, that takes us to our top stories.
Well, indeed, in China, 2 Communist Party secretaries have been removed from office in Hubei province as the number of dead and the number of infections jump. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
State media say both the Hubei and Wuhan party bosses have been sacked. It comes as Hubei reports 14,840 new confirmed cases, this having to do with a change in methodology. They added cases that were confirmed via imaging scans to the previous method of testing kits. Also, China has named a new head to the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, the latest fallout from months of anti-government protests. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And it was announced yesterday that the wireless industry has scrapped its biggest annual showcase. That's after the coronavirus outbreak sparked an exodus of participants. It's bad news for the telecoms industry just as it's preparing for the rollout of 5G. It's the first time in its 33-year history that organisers have called off the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona.
Right, let's get the latest global news, and we start with Leanne Gerrans on the coronavirus, inevitably, and a ship.
Yes, good morning, Roger. We'll start with that, with cases on board a quarantined ship in Japan. That's of the coronavirus, which may be evidence that passengers are spreading the infections to each other, raising concerns about their safety. Bloomberg's Isabel Reynolds has more.
44 new cases emerged Thursday to make a total of 218. Japan announced it would allow vulnerable passengers, especially those aged over 80 and those with underlying health conditions, to disembark if they test negative and move to government-approved accommodation on shore. That still leaves more than 3,000 people who are likely to have to wait on board the liner in Yokohama until the incubation period is over on February the 19th. In Tokyo, Isabel Reynolds, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
As Roger mentioned earlier, here in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is set to reshuffle his cabinet. That's later today, as he plans to promote a number of women to government roles. He's facing calls to increase diversity in his cabinet. A senior official says the overall number of women in the cabinet isn't expected to go down, despite speculation that some high-profile women could indeed be fired. In Italy, Matteo Salvini will stand trial for refusing to allow stranded migrants into the country, an outcome he is likely to welcome, as migration control is his key campaign platform. Bloomberg's John Verlaine has more.
The Rome Senate gave the go-ahead to a trial for Salvini after he blocked a ship carrying rescued migrants from docking in a Sicilian port last July. Prosecutors charged Salvini, who was Interior Minister at the time, with kidnapping. Salvini says he was applying government policy. A guilty verdict in an initial trial could prevent him from standing as the centre-right bloc's candidate for Prime Minister. In Rome, John Verlaine, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And today, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa will deliver what has been dubbed the most important State of the Nation address in more than 20 years. His speech comes as the country tries to hold off a credit rating downgrade from Moody's. An outline of the implementation process to get embattled state-owned companies on a better footing is expected to take a centre stage. Ramaphosa will also be expected to deliver a turnaround plan for the country's loss-making airline, South African Airways. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we will bring you our interviews with Credit Suisse outgoing CEO Tidjane Thiam and Barclays CEO Jez Staley. This is Bloomberg.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
IBKR is the professional's gateway to the world's markets. IBKR offers commissions starting at $0 for U.S.-listed stocks and ETFs, enhanced price execution via IB Smart Routing, and access to our powerful trader workstation, web, mobile, and API trading platforms. In addition, our clients enjoy the lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, fixed income, and more on over 125 markets in 31 countries. Learn more or open an IBKR integrated investment account at IBKR.com.
Welcome back to the Dog Show. Up next, we have Satchmo. Satchmo is a member of the Shelter Pet Group.
That's right, a group known especially for their couch-snuggling, ball-chasing, face-licking, and, of course, companionship. Now, let's see him in action.
Look how he makes eye contact with his person.
That's actually known as the treat stare.
How intuitive. And now he appears to be excitedly turning in circles.
The happy dance so common with this group.
But really, the best way to know an amazing shelter pet like Satchmo is to meet one.
Visit theshelterpetproject.org today. Adopt.
Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
3 commodities, metallurgical coal, aluminium and manganese, all slumped last year as the trade war between the US and China crimped demand. Joining us now from Perth is CEO and Managing Director Graham Kerr. Graham, just as we had that phase 1 trade deal, then coronavirus hits the global economy. Can you tell us what kind of implications this has for demand destruction for the quantities that you're in the business of shipping to China? Have you had any requests for force majeure or flexibility in deliveries from Chinese customers so far?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. If you think about where we are, the first half of the financial year for us was a tough year on prices, but interesting enough, the last 2 months we've actually seen increases in most of our commodity prices, and I think that's part of the challenge with the coronavirus is not only the uncertainty surrounding it, but for some commodities it's actually having a positive impact in the short term. You asked a question about have we had any, refusals, letters of credit refusals, or turning away of cargoes. At the moment, for the majority of our commodities, the demand is actually still strong, and in fact there's a preference for some imported ore rather than domestic ore, particularly in manganese and also in met coal, which we see as a positive. Now, the key question for us is how long does that it'll last for, and obviously what comes out the back end as China continues to come out of Chinese New Year.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now over to the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin. For today's morning call, here's Richard Jones.
Good morning, Sandra. It's been a down day across most equity markets in Asia today, with the Shanghai Composite trading lower by 0.7% and the CSI 300 down by 0.6. The E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures are also both trading lower, down by 5 and 0.6% respectively. European equities have also opened up on the back foot this morning, with the Euro Stoxx 50, the DAX, and the CAC 40 all lower by 0.4%, with the FTSE 100 underperforming, trading down by 1%. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is 5 basis points lower at 1.59%, while the 10-year German bond yield is trading 2 basis points lower at minus 0.4%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is lower by 0.1%. In terms of European economic data today, later this morning we get the European Commission publishing its winter forecasts, in addition to several central bank speakers throughout the day, including the ECB's Hernandez de Cos, Lane and Panetta, in addition to the Norges Bank's Olsen. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg Terminal. Sandra?
Thanks, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. In the US, President Donald Trump has denied meddling in Roger Stone's criminal prosecution. He says tweets about the case didn't amount to political interference. 4 federal prosecutors have resigned from the case. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and TikTok will have to reveal users' identities if Indian government agencies ask them to. That's according to the country's controversial new rules for social media companies expected to be published later this month. India's new guidelines go further than most other countries. And Formula One has confirmed it's postponing this year's Chinese Grand Prix due to the coronavirus outbreak. The announcement by Formula One made on Twitter said the event scheduled for April the 17th to 19th was postponed. The Chinese Grand Prix is the latest to join a list of global events cancelled or postponed due to the outbreak. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Let's get back to the banking earnings this morning. Barclays CEO Jez Staley has stolen the headlines with the news that the FCA is probing his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Staley discussed the probe with Bloomberg's Anna Edwards and Matt Miller earlier as it reported fourth quarter CIB revenue that missed estimates.
It's well known in the press that I have had a long-standing professional relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It began in 2000 when I was asked to run J.P. Morgan's private bank, and he was already a client of the bank at that time. The investigation is actually focused on transparency of whether I was transparent with and open with the bank and with the board with respect to my relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And indeed, it's clear in my own mind that going all the way back to 2015 when I joined Barclays, I have been very transparent with the bank and very open and willing to discuss the relationship that I had with him. And if you look at the RNS, I think what's important to note is the board has done its own review, and they've looked back at my transparency, and they concluded indeed that I have been transparent and open with the bank and with the board all along this process. And in fact, they have unanimously voted for me to be put up for re-election at the AGM meeting later this year. So full support from the chairman and from the board. But there is a regulatory process that is ongoing, and we'll let that run its course.
Okay. Do you understand, though, or is it the case that new information has come to light on which the FCA has made this decision? Why has the FCA decided to launch this probe at this time?
I'm not going to go into the issues of why the FCA. I mean, clearly there's been obviously a lot of press, but I've been very transparent with the bank all along, and I think the bank has been very transparent to the FCA, and we'll just let the review by the FCA reach its conclusion.
That was Barclays CEO Jez Staley speaking to Bloomberg TV earlier, of course. Most of that sound focused on the probe, the FCA probing the relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, but that miss in the fourth quarter CIB revenue, but also the comment that it would be challenging to get that 10% return on tangible equity in 2020 means the shares down 2% in today's session, Roger.
Meanwhile, Tidjane Thiam's final set of results as CEO of Credit Suisse have been marred by an unexpected loss at the investment bank and lower than unexpected earnings at the trading unit. But speaking to Bloomberg's Francine Lacqua earlier this morning, Thiam insisted the Swiss lender got off to a flying start in 2020.
Credit Suisse, the teams have done an amazing job since 2015 when I arrived. This is my 19th results. And if you look at the new Credit Suisse, it produced a profit of about 5.1 billion, so we're above 5 billion. And we took at the end, last week, a provision of about 320 billion. But we are comfortably above 4 billion, which is, considering where we started, a tribute to our clients and to our staff. So overall, a good end for my final year.
So what will your legacy be? Do you think?
I think really it's having put the company on solid ground, solid foundation, a lot of capital. We've increased the capital base very significantly, which allows us now to go through our cycles with a quiet mind. We've reduced the risks very significantly, and in wealth management, the strategy has been very, very successful. We added more than $200 billion of assets. The profits almost doubled in 4 years, and we've also reduced a lot of legacy issues that we have. So the combination of building a new platform, focusing on wealth management, growing, has created a platform that produces 9% ROTE in 2019, which is not bad. And the start of Q1 is off to a flying start. We said in the release, all divisions are. So I feel like the machine is turning and producing better and better results.
When you look at the plight of a lot of these banks, what do you think will be much more difficult for Credit Suisse going forward? Is it negative rates? Is it the world economy? Is it something else?
I mean, the world economy is, of course, always the number one driver of what we do. In the end, we operate in the global economy. But we are positive about the world economy. We think that the US economy is solid. So far, we think that the coronavirus is every day in the news and a topic of worry, and we've done a lot of work to protect our staff, but we think it will be ultimately contained. So we're quite positive on the world economy, and we have been very effective in finding answers to the negative interest rate. You will see that in Switzerland we suffered a little bit in 19, but we took some measures that have started to produce an effect in 19, and we're seeing them working very well in 20. So we can counter that quite effectively, and our transaction revenue is also up quite significantly.
Outgoing Credit Suisse CEO Tidjane Thiam, shares down 1.5%.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Less than 2 weeks before it was to get underway, the wireless industry's biggest trade show has been called off. Organizers canceled the show for the first time in its 33-year history as big-name attendees pulled out due to coronavirus concerns. The event in Barcelona, Spain, draws over 100,000 participants from around the world. We may hear more later today about how the epidemic is impacting the travel business as Expedia reports its fourth-quarter earnings. Cruise operator Carnival said yesterday that the coronavirus may sink its financial results as the leisure industry deals with quarantines, travel restrictions, and growing fears. On Wall Street, worries about the virus appear to be easing. Stocks surged yesterday to another round of all-time highs on hopes that the coronavirus spread is slowing and that the global economy can recover from the illness's impact. China's Hubei province reported the lowest number of new cases this month. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
P&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Why do so many Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies count on GEP? Because GEP helps them optimize their procurement and supply chain operations, helping reduce expenses, boost EBITDA, and increase competitiveness. The results are nothing short of amazing. Strategy, software, managed services. GEP brings it all together. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
For up to 50% off selected floors and beds, and up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Switch to 5G on Vodafone. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G by March 8th and get wireless Galaxy Buds Plus for free. With unlimited 5G data, you can post 108 megapixel photos and download videos impossibly fast. All on the UK's best mobile data network. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
5G subject to coverage in your area. MPerf test awarded Vodafone Best 2019 Mobile Internet Performance. Minimum term applies. See vodafone.co.uk.
This is our story. The Birds of Prey.
Yeah. Roman is building an army. He's after all of us. We gotta clean the city from the inside out.
Critics are saying Margot Robbie is brilliant as Harley Quinn.
Hi, boys.
A fantastic assault on the senses. An irresistible riot of popcorn fun. Brilliantly acted and very funny. 4 stars. Birds of Prey. In cinemas now. Certificate 15.
The famous 5 are discussing their next adventure to Bristol. Let's visit Clifton Suspension Bridge, said Dick. SS Great Britain, added Julian. The harbour, cried Anne. Dick jumped up. We'd better leave now. Bristol's so far away. Relax, said George. It's faster than you think by train. Anyway, we can't go yet. You're still in your pyjamas. London to Bristol in as little as 68 minutes. So adventures are closer than you think. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Fastest train from Paddington to Bristol Parkway. Terms and conditions apply.
They don't chant your name when you give blood, or sing songs about you. But patients and their families will remember you forever. Because your blood can change their lives. We need more blood donors in Tooting, the West End, and Edgware. Bleed for London. Join us today at blood.co.uk.
Give mealtimes a makeover. Give it some gusto. Give it crispy chili haddock with pak choy noodles or smoky Spanish chicken from just £2.98 per plate. Give it more than 40 delicious recipes to choose from every week and all the ingredients you need for cooking at home. Give your hob a workout. Go on, give it some gusto. Visit gusto.co.uk today and get 50% off your first box. Subscription auto-renews, cancel anytime.
TSB's Fix and Flex loan offers one of the best rates you can get. 2.9% APR representative fixed for up to 5 years. On loans from £7,500 to £25,000. Subject to status, UK residents only over 21. Based on de facto data, January 2020.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
30 minutes into the equity market open in Europe. The risk-on that we've seen for most of this week is taking a hit today. Cross-asset, the Stock 600 down 0.4% after 3 days in the green. Looking across regional equity benchmarks, the FTSE 100 down 0.9%, the CAC 40 lower by 0.2%, the DAX lower by 0.4%, IBEX and FTSE MIB in the red. led. In the US, we saw records on the S&P 500 and the Dow yesterday. And in fact, global equities, the MSCI All-Country World Index hit a record high. But US futures point to a lower open today. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all lower by 0.4%. What's prompted the change in sentiment is some news that China's used a different methodology to calculate the infection rate, which is putting question marks over whether we're actually seeing stabilization in those Chinese coronavirus cases. The 10-year Treasury yield down 4 basis points to a 159 handle. Yields dropping in Europe as well. In FX, we've seen money move into the yen. We've seen commodity currencies come under pressure along with the yuan weakening. The euro hit a 2017 low in yesterday's session. Industrial production data causing concern. A number of strategists rejigging their forecasts for the euro. Crédit Agricole, the latest to add to JP Morgan and RBC Capital Markets last week at 108.82. The Bloomberg survey for year end is 115. Can we still get there with where the euro is trading right now? Oil was pushed around a little bit by the coronavirus headlines, and it has shown some strength this week despite rising inventories in the US. WTI and Brent on the back foot now, though. WTI at $51 a barrel, Brent crude at $55.41. And of course, we've got a ton of corporate news today as well, Roger. We've got news from Barclays and Credit Suisse. Both those share prices are lower, but we've also had the likes of Nestle and ThyssenKrupp reporting as well.
There's been a lot of movement out there, but of course, major focus globally is on the virus and its progress in China. That's our top story. Cases have jumped by nearly 15,000 overnight. That's around a 45% increase, but it's mostly down to a new methodology for counting infections. China is removing senior local officials, and that comes amid deepening concerns about early efforts to suppress information about the severity of the outbreak.
Meanwhile, car sales in China plunged to fresh lows in January. That's as the coronavirus kept buyers away from showrooms, intensifying the gloom hanging over the industry. Sales to dealerships fell 2% to 1.61 million cars last month. That's the biggest monthly drop since January 2012.
And Nissan's cut its full-year outlook for the second quarter in a row. The Japanese automaker also scrapped its year-end dividend. Now, that's raised questions about Nissan's ability to return cash to investors. Its top shareholder is the French partner Renault.
And on corporate news, if we turn to Barclays, it says that CEO Jez Staley's relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein is being probed by the Financial Conduct Authority. It's his second run-in with regulators since joining the bank. In 2018, he was fined for attempts to uncover a whistleblower. And that's really caught most of the attention today, even as we have had earnings with fourth quarter CIB revenue missing estimates. They've maintained their return on tangible equity 10% target for 2020, but said it could be challenging. Barclays shares down 2.6%, and then Credit Suisse shares down 1.9% as well. Of course, it was the final earnings for outgoing CEO Tidjane Thiam after he was ousted last week following a boardroom battle with the spying scandal and weighing on the bank since about September. The shares dropping after an unexpectedly big investment banking loss, but revenue and pre-tax profit in the wealth management business beat estimates. Thiam flagged a flying start to this year.
Okay, now BP's new CEO has set out the oil industry's boldest plan to tackle climate change. All that's missing is the map of how to get there. Bernard Looney has been CEO for just a week, and he's committed BP to eliminating all emissions from its own operations and production by 2050. But speaking to Bloomberg's Alex Steele, he revealed he doesn't have detailed near-term targets yet.
A lot of people spend a lot of time trying to debate what might happen and what will happen and what's going to happen to price. And
that's why I have a job.
It's something that I don't try to spend a huge amount of time on, to be honest, because the reality is, and the coronavirus is a great example, we just don't know what the future holds. We don't control the price. What we do control is our cost base. What we do control is our break-even. And that's what we're focused on very, very much. BP is very fortunate to be in a place where we're coming into a period of time where we have a lot of projects coming online, 35 projects between 2016 and 2021, 23 already online, 12 more to go. We're entering a period where we will have excess free cash flows, and what that means, as you well know, is that our break-even will continue to go down over the coming years. So that's what I'm very focused on, is making sure that we build an increasingly resilient business, because for all the reasons that we have talked about at the beginning, the future is unpredictable. We do control our cost base, and that's what we're focused on.
So Shell got really hurt in its last earnings. They really modeled their plan on $65 oil and staying there and rising. It didn't get there, and it's not rising from there either. What did you model your next sort of 30-year outlook that you unveiled today? What oil price does that depend on?
Well, again, anybody that's trying to predict the price of oil next week or next month, let alone in 30 years, I think is on a bit of a fool's errand.
You need to run your models for cash flow.
What I will tell you is what we are doing. And over the next couple of years, in fact, in 2021, we will drive the break-even of the business down to $40. We believe that that's a very resilient price that enables us to withstand a variety of environments. So we run all sorts of scenarios, as you say. We run $60, $70 scenarios. We run $50 scenarios. We may run higher scenarios. Nobody quite knows what the future does look like. What we are trying to test is how does it look in a range of scenarios and how resilient is the portfolio.
And all of this ties into the plan that you unveiled. And what you drove home very hard when we did our Q&A was that it's a gearing, it's dividend, and it's the energy transition. The three things that shareholders want and the three things that you're committed to. There is just a lot of skepticism among investors that you can do all three at the same time.
I understand. And I think we have been listening to our shareholders. And as I said earlier, people want us to get our gearing back into range, which we can and will do. People want to know that the dividend is protected and is secure. And people want us to invest in and partake in the energy transition. Now, depending on what investor you're talking to and depending where you are in the world, the order of those priorities may change. The question for us is, can we deliver all three? And I fundamentally believe that we can. I think there is a sense out there that investing in the energy transition is somehow adding more and more and more capital to the system. What I said earlier today is that we are absolutely committed to capital discipline. Our current range is $15 to $17 billion. I made it very clear that we do not need to see that number rise, and that when we come back with our strategic update in September, that will be the capital guidance for the company in the years ahead.
And that was the BP CEO, Bernard Looney. And let me tell you that currently BP share price is down 2.5%.
Let's get the world news with Leanne Gerrans. Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. Schools across Hong Kong will remain closed until the 16th of March after the Education Bureau extended the date by 2 weeks. Classes were set to resume on March the 2nd, but that's been pushed back amid the coronavirus outbreak. Education Secretary Kevin Yang says students have been advised to make use of e-learning during the campus closures.
Schools are making use of different modes of learning, including e-learning, to achieve the goal of suspending classes without suspending learning. The arrangements are premised on the principle of maintaining students' motivation and interest in learning.
The coronavirus death toll has now risen above 1,300. Here in the UK, Boris Johnson unveils his cabinet reshuffle today in what will be a key indicator of his intentions for post-Brexit Britain. Bloomberg's Sebastian Sarlik reports.
This was expected to be a dramatic shakeout of the top jobs, but protests over the lack of women in the cabinet and concerns about sending powerful people to make trouble on the backbenches appears to have derailed the more radical plans from Number 10 advisor Dominic Cummings. The Chancellor appears to be safe, but both the Defence Secretary and the Attorney General look vulnerable. Downing Street says this will be a promotion of a generation of particularly female talent into junior roles to prepare them for cabinet posts in the years to come. In London, I'm Sebastian Sarlik, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And in Italy, Matteo Salvini will stand trial for refusing to allow stranded migrants into the country, an outcome he is likely to welcome as migration is his key campaign platform. The Rome Senate gave the go-ahead to a trial for Salvini. Prosecutors charged Salvini, who was Interior Minister at the time, with kidnapping. He said he was applying government policy. A guilty verdict in an initial trial could prevent him from standing as the centre-right bloc's candidate for Prime Minister. Global News 24 hours a day today on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Thanks so much indeed, Leanne. Now, Helen Bradshaw, Portfolio Manager at Quilter Investors, will be joining us next. We'll get her take on the slew of earnings that have come out this morning and what corporates have had to say about the impact of the coronavirus outbreak, which is still evolving, as we now know, a slightly different number coming from China. This is Bloomberg.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba, please be done. Over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
In today's volatile markets, investors need resilient portfolios to help handle the pressure. Through decades of expansions and recessions and changing interest rates, clients have turned to PIMCO to help them stay on course, no matter what course markets take. PIMCO, active fixed income solutions that aim to give investors an edge. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Investing in the bond market is subject to risks. Consult your investment professional prior to making an investment decision.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
For up to 50% off selected floors and beds. For first-class fitting. For kicking your heels off. For overexcited kids. And pets. For thrills and spills. For a special welcome home. For up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Finding your perfect new home can be tough. So if you keep missing out,
it's time to search out On the Market.
There are thousands of new properties to buy or rent every month at onthemarket.com. 24 hours or more before they're on Rightmove or Zoopla.
On the Market.
See them first. Set up a property alert today.
Search onthemarket.com to find your perfect home.
If you're in the market, search onthemarket.com. See onthemarket.com/new and exclusive. Agents specify exclusivity.
This is our story. The Birds of Prey. Yeah. Roman is building an army. He's after all of us. We gotta clean the city from the inside out.
Critics are saying Margot Robbie is brilliant as Harley Quinn.
Hi, boys.
A fantastic assault on the senses. An irresistible riot of popcorn fun. Brilliantly acted and very funny. 4 stars. Birds of Prey. In cinemas now. Certificate 15.
TSB's Fix and Flex loan offers one of the best rates you can get. 2.9% APR representative fixed for up to 5 years. And the freedom to pay more whenever you want. Or even take a break if you like. Because no one can really predict what the future holds. On loans from £7,500 to £25,000. Subject to status, UK residents only, over 21. Based on de facto data January 2020. Up to 2 repayment holidays a year subject to approval.
Give family meals a makeover. Give it some gusto. Give it goodbye after work supermarket dash. Give it 10-minute dishes like red jumbo prawn curry and family favourites like honey mustard chicken tray bake. Give it dinner sorted with more than 40 recipes to choose from every week. Give it something to smile about. Go on, give it some gusto. Visit gusto.co.uk today and get 50% off your first box. Subscription auto-renews, cancel anytime.
Rita's Rowdy Enchiladas.
Every time the kids are together, it's always the same. Never a moment's peace. Didn't take me long to work out the trick though. Shredded chicken and black bean enchiladas with lime, oregano, and my little secret. A bit of smoke and spice with chipotle paste. Hear that? Never failed yet.
Make Rita's Rowdy Enchiladas tonight with Tesco British Chicken. Food Love Stories, brought to you by Tesco.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London, Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What sea sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, European stock markets are in the red with the Stock 600 and the DAX down 0.5%, while the FTSE has fallen 0.9%. US equity futures also in the red after China reported a jump in coronavirus cases in the Hubei province using a revised methodology. Now, there are lots of earnings to get across today too. Barclays currently down 2.5% here in London. This after revenue missed estimates. Credit Suisse also lower by 2%. Commerzbank, meanwhile, gaining almost 5% this morning in Frankfurt. This as the bank plans further cost cuts and reported a profit gain this morning. Also, lots of other stocks to keep an eye on. Nestle, Clariant, Orange, you name it, all of them to look at this morning. Now, that risk-off sentiment we're seeing in the markets is boosting dollar yen, currently up 0.3% at 109.8. We're seeing the Aussie and the Kiwi dollars a bit lower. On the other hand, the offshore yuan also taking a hit, currently down 0.2% at 6.98. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index a bit weaker as well, down 0.1%. Sterling at 129. The euro just below 109. The flight to safety boosting bonds. We're seeing 10-year Treasury yields down 5 basis points to 1.58%. 10-year bund yields down 2 basis points to negative 40. 10-year gilt yields falling 3 basis points, currently at 58 basis points. Gold enjoying a bit of a safe haven bid, currently up 0.5% at $1,574 a troy ounce. Silver surging 1% to almost $18. Oil is unchanged with WTI crude trading around just below $51 a barrel as Russia's top oil producers are said to back OPEC plus production cuts. But of course, that rise in virus cases weighing on demand at the same time. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Passengers and crew aboard a luxury cruise liner will finally set foot on dry land. The 2,257 people have been at sea for 2 weeks after being barred from 5 ports on coronavirus fears. The ship has arrived in a Cambodian port and local officials have boarded the vessel, according to the ship's operator. Some passengers have already been issued tickets home. Today, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa will deliver what has been dubbed the most important State of the Nation address in more than 20 years. An outline of the implementation process to get embattled state-owned companies on a better footing is indeed expected to take centre stage. Ramaphosa is also expected to deliver a turnaround plan for the country's loss-making airline, South African Airways. And the world's richest man, Jeff Bezos, is on a shopping spree. The Amazon founder has agreed to pay $165 million for a Beverly Hills mansion of 9 acres. That's according to a person with knowledge on the matter, setting a record for an LA home. This news comes just days after filings show Bezos cashed out $4.1 billion of Amazon shares. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Let's get to our guest for the rest of the hour. And the coronavirus death toll has topped 1,300, with the number of infections surging by more than 15,000. That's after China revised its method for diagnosing the illness. It's dashing hope that the epidemic was showing signs of easing. For more on the economic and market impact, we're joined by Helen Bradshaw, Portfolio Manager at Quilter Investors. Helen, great to have you with us today. We're seeing broad risk-off cross assets. I guess what the market has to grapple with now is whether this new methodology means that risk should be taken off the table because that inflection point in cases hasn't come yet, or perhaps we see it as a buying opportunity because it means that we now might get a more realistic view of how this evolves. Which side of that debate do you sit on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the first hand, actually, we've seen recently markets actually being, relatively benign in the last week, as it looks like the number of new cases has actually started to decline. Now, obviously, this has changed overnight, and as a result, you've seen markets give back some of these gains. But I think partly it's not surprising. There have been a huge amount of skepticism, actually, as to the accuracy of the data that we are seeing coming out of China. So on the one hand, I don't think there's a huge surprise. But I think the key still is, and the thing that investors are having to grapple with, is actually how big is this epidemic, and how can we reliably get information that signs of new cases are starting to peak? Because that is the key question, remains the key question, as to how big this impact will be, and particularly how big it will be for companies, and the hit on global growth more generally. And that still remains uncertain. So I think the news that we have new numbers is not surprising because of this these questions about the accuracy. But it does, I think, give people pause for thought, certainly, that actually maybe this is slightly bigger than we had been thinking, and not being contained as well as we had originally thought over the last week.
So, Helen, therefore, the thought is where is safe really in all this? And one interesting thing I think is the way that tech stocks still seem to be a kind of best hedge against a prolonged period of virus-affected growth. I mean, do you see that?
I don't necessarily think any stock is immune to any hit or ultimate impact on global growth. So tech stocks have seen a sort of rapid rise and seem actually immune to anything at the moment. And actually, interestingly, even yesterday, we're reaching new highs in markets. It seems like almost anything you could throw at it wouldn't stop this rise. So it's not surprising to see some pullback. And on the other hand, you do have central banks around the world ready to act, and they have been vocal about this. You've heard Jay Powell saying that, there will be data coming through showing the ultimate impact of the coronavirus on the US, something they're watching closely. It's something the ECB have talked about, and actually here in the Bank of England, they remain on the front foot to act too. And so let's not forget what's happening with the People's Bank of China and the stimulus that we've seen there. So yes, it may be, the virus and the impact can't be underestimated, but at the same time, we have central banks still in very accommodative mode with a lot of easing. And if you look at past epidemics, often this has been presented a buying opportunity for investors.
So at Quilter then, would you be inclined to take the view in your portfolio, we're going to keep buying equities because it's a resilient market that does seem to seize on good news or even the prospect of good news whenever it comes along, but at the same time that backstop of central banks is going to keep supporting equities but also bond market, so we buy equities and bonds?
Yeah, I think the fundamental backdrop is still positive and it's still supportive, so it's important to remember that. In terms of adding to an Asian emerging market exposure, we do have some, but we have not added yet, because what I would like to see is some signs that we are seeing a peak in the number of new cases being reported. When we can see signs of that and get some comfort that the contagion is being contained, I do think that would present an opportunity to add to our exposure here and hopefully at slightly reduced prices and valuations.
What about the impact on a wider area? I mean, the euro, for example, very eye-catching at the moment, seems to be completely friendless, sliding towards multi-year lows. The ECB's Philip Lane has warned the outbreak could have a pretty serious short-term hit to Europe's economy, but we have heard the suggestion even the recession risk in Germany might be bigger, but some people are saying that's priced in. How are you reading the European effect?
I think Europe's been in a very difficult place because actually people forget last year the impact in Europe from the trade war with China. So actually Europe is very, very trade dependent, and actually in some places about a fifth of their employment is manufacturing and trade. So they're getting over some of the impact from the US and China trade war, and then this year being presented from the impact for the coronavirus. Now that will have an impact. You've seen that being spoken about in Italy. Concerns about the economy there. So the outlook continues to be very hard in Europe. But again, at the same time, you have some other factors. We talk about the ECB remains in very, very easing, dovish tones coming from the ECB. Valuations are very attractive, particularly when you look relative to other regions such as the US. And you mentioned earlier about sentiment. I mean, it remains very under-owned and very unloved. So if we could see some pickup, I think, in confidence, business confidence in Europe, and see some signs of pickup in capex, actually, I think that could be an opportunity for Europe, and there's a lot of sort of catch-up potential to be had.
Interesting. I suppose the emergence of the coronavirus, though, puts a lot of that into question. One of the reasons the euro hit that 2017 low yesterday. Saxo Capital Markets have said that the 10-year Treasury yield may drop below 1% on the virus fallout. I mean, we're almost 60 basis points away from that now, but they say one cannot own enough US duration. Is that the take in your portfolio?
We do have some duration exposure in the portfolio. If we look at it from an absolute value, do you think it is hard to argue with yields so low, on that front? But actually, it does continue to have a place within a portfolio in terms of providing some hedge and some diversification benefits in these risk-off, volatile environments. And you look, where else would you find those diversification benefits? Well, clearly there's gold if you want some commodity exposure. US dollars too, but actually I think treasuries do still have a place, actually duration even here in the UK, but as part of a broad portfolio, and you are still seeing them providing that benefit within a portfolio too.
All right, Helen, thank you very much indeed. Helen Bradshaw, their portfolio manager at Quilter Investors, joining us live in the studio here in Daybreak Europe. And coming up in the next hour, Matt Miller and Anna Edwards are back, and they'll be speaking to Rebecca Chesworth, VP for Exchange Traded Funds at State Street.
We're almost an hour into the equity market open here in Europe after 3 days of gains and global equities hitting records yesterday. The Stock 600's on the back foot, down 0.5%. A tone of caution across markets. The 10-year Treasury yield slipping 5 basis points towards a 158 handle. This is Bloomberg.
Are you... Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL. Every journey matters.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
I'll read Stan. Will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see 3 men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns.
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
What we're now seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some type of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, although recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of fragility.
We've seen this before, trade talks that lead nowhere, and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other, and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And good morning from Bloomberg's Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
And let's talk about where we are on these markets, Matt. And let's do that by focusing in on a red headline that has just broken across the Bloomberg, because it links in with what we're seeing on other equity markets and other assets, today. So the IEA, the energy agency, sees the first global oil demand drop in a decade on coronavirus. So this is a new forecast coming through from the IEA. Really interesting to see them giving us this new assessment then of what's going on with coronavirus this morning. Demand seen falling by 435,000 barrels a day in the first quarter. They say that markets face considerable surplus despite OPEC plus output cuts. Will this lead to more action from OPEC and its friends? But I mentioned that at the start of this program, partly because it's just broken and also because it is concerns around coronavirus once again weighing on equity markets and other risk assets here in Europe. US futures also point lower. So US futures weaker by 0.5% to 0.6%, and equity markets in Europe down 0.5% as a whole. The FTSE 100 down by just shy of 1%. The DAX down 0.5%. The CAC down 0.3%. So concern once again, partly because we've seen this change in methodology coming through from China. What does that mean about, is that just going to be a buy the dip opportunity, a pause for thought, or does it tell us something worrying about the way that the rules of the data game are changing midway through? We'll focus in on that data, of course. The oil price is weaker once again today, down by 1% on Brent at $55 a barrel. And we have a yield on the US 10-year. No surprise, investors going into fixed income, and the yield comes down to 1.58%. Matt?
All right, let's talk about havens like the yen, treasuries, gold. They're all bid after the Chinese province at the center of the coronavirus epidemic has reported a surge in cases, up by 45%, as Anna said, due to a change in methodology to nearly 50,000. Authorities added, and by the way, that's 50,000 in China, right? Because worldwide, it's 60,000. Authorities added a new group of patients who are diagnosed by a different method, boosting the number of confirmed cases worldwide by an extra 15,000. That's what's driven the top line. For more on what this means for markets, let's bring in Rebecca Chesworth. She is VP for Exchange Traded Funds at State Street. Rebecca, you're arguing that markets are jumping from one black swan to another. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that people react very quickly on the day to negative news, and that could be because we're actually receiving our information much more quickly these days. We're all looking at the same thing. You've got automated trading, which often means there are flash falls within equity prices, and you've got CTA funds who buy futures. All of those things lead to a much greater response far quicker. But then equally on the upside, you see things return very, very quickly, and that can leave opportunities in its wake. But also, and that's what we're seeing today, it does mean that we can ignore ongoing impacts, and that's what we've seen with the coronavirus. We've seen people say, it's okay, and then guess what? We've seen a second leg.
Yeah, so we see a second leg downwards, another wave of concern to go with that higher wave of infection rates. Where do you hide out from this to the extent that you think we need to then, Rebecca?
So there are, as Matt mentions, those traditional safe havens. I think healthcare is one very interesting area. Obviously, one can't benefit from a virus vaccination yet, but it is an area that's defensive, that does have earnings growth. Or you look for those opportunities that have just fallen too far, and maybe the banks which are reporting very interesting results today, the European banks, that could just be an area that carries on regardless.
What about emerging markets, commodities, commodity currencies? Do you see big dips there?
These are certainly more impacted than most. So yes, long term there will be buying opportunities, but one has to work through a bit more of the ripple effect. So as I said, a lot of obvious things have gone down. So we saw the oil price go down in response to reduced demand for travel, for fuel, etc. But there are a lot of other things out there that maybe haven't been priced in yet, such as the global supply chain reactions.
Yeah, and let me ask you about this new report from the IEA then, saying that global oil demand will drop this quarter for the first time in over a decade. This they attribute to the coronavirus, saying it's going to batter the Chinese economy. These are the kinds of reassessments that we need to see, I suppose, coming through from anybody in the energy markets with regards to coronavirus.
Yes, and it's good to have some clarification, even if it is on the downside. What we need to hear next, and you did mention it, in the past, the OPEC Plus have come out, that group of very big oil producers have come out with production cuts. We need to hear more of that. We've heard a lot from Saudi Arabia and how they would like to respond, but they nearly need to pull in some of the other big producers such as Russia and respond on that now.
Do you have any kind of assessment for how much damage this kind of the coronavirus has done to demand? I mean, we've seen factories shut down. Clearly, people aren't driving as much. I saw yesterday the Formula One race in Shanghai has been postponed. So it's
and car sales in China, I saw, Matt, dropping the most in 8 years.
Right, which already car sales growth in China had been a problem. What do you think we're going to see after all of this, Rebecca, or is there still too much uncertainty?
I think there's too much uncertainty to say we've got a complete handle on it. What one needs to think about when you think about whether this is an opportunity to buy or not is, does it affect the ongoing profitability? Because yes, if you have a Q1 impact that takes down earnings, where you need to see is where it's also taken down maybe the rating as well because of longer term concerns. So you need to weigh up both parts of that.
Let me ask you about another concern for investors or interesting investment theme of late around ESG. Of course, it's been the talk of the investment community to a large extent over recent months, Rebecca. And I noticed we had these Airbus numbers out a little bit earlier on today, and they had to take a charge because of an ongoing ban by Germany on selling certain arms, essentially, certain military product, at least, to Saudi Arabia. This is another arm of the ESG topic that we don't talk about as much as the environmental arm, but are we seeing pressure from investors gathering on that front as well?
Yes, we definitely are. So ESG investment can take many forms. The simplest and the easiest way to invest ethically is to exclude companies who are doing, in inverted commas, bad. And that can include tobacco stocks, it can include coal, and in this case includes controversial weapons. And Airbus is one of those stocks that gets excluded from ESG exclusion indices because it either manufactures or handles some bad things like landmines that people just do not want to be involved with. This will be an ongoing pressure for this industry.
All right, Rebecca, it's been a pleasure having you with us today, both on television and here on radio. Thanks so much for joining us. Rebecca Chesworth there is VP for Exchange Traded Funds at State Street, and really appreciate your time. Now let's get over to Leanne Gerrans with some global news headlines.
Matt, thank you. As mentioned earlier, in China, coronavirus cases have jumped by nearly 15,000 overnight. That's around a 45% increase, but it's mostly down to a new methodology for counting infections. China is removing senior local officials. That's amid deepening concerns about early efforts to suppress information about the severity of the outbreak. The death toll has now passed 1,300. Here in the UK, Boris Johnson unveils his cabinet reshuffle today and what will be a key indicator of his intentions for post-Brexit Britain. Bloomberg's Sebastian Salek reports.
This was expected to be a dramatic shakeout of the top jobs, but protests over the lack of women in the cabinet and concerns about sending powerful people to make trouble on the backbenchers appears to have derailed and the more radical plans from Number 10 advisor Dominic Cummings. The Chancellor appears to be safe, but both the Defence Secretary and the Attorney General look vulnerable. Downing Street says this will be a promotion of a generation of particularly female talent into junior roles to prepare them for cabinet posts in the years to come. In London, I'm Sebastian Salek, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa came to power 2 years ago, pledging a new dawn of reforms, economic growth and jobs. Today, he will deliver what has been dubbed as the most important State of the Nation address that's in more than 20 years. Bloomberg's Amo Mbata reports.
As the country looks to stave off a credit ratings downgrade by Moody's, which would plunge its overall rating to junk status. An outline of the implementation process to get the country's embattled state-owned companies on a better footing is expected to take center stage. Ramaphosa is also expected to deliver a turnaround plan for the country's loss-making airline South African Airways. In Johannesburg, Amkhalang Bata, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And the world's richest man, Jeff Bezos, is on a shopping spree. The Amazon founder has agreed to pay $165 million for a Beverly Hills mansion of 9 acres. That's according to a person with knowledge of the matter, setting a record for an LA home. The news comes just days after filings show Bezos cashed out $4.1 billion of Amazon shares. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Thanks very much, Leanne. With your morning sports news, here's William Essler.
West Brom have moved 6 points clear at the top of the Championship after a 2-1 win at Reading. Fulham missed the chance to go second following a 1-1 draw at Millwall. Luton got just their second win in 12 league games by beating Sheffield Wednesday 1-0. Bristol City held off a fight back from Derby to win 3-2. Cardiff are 4 points off the playoff spots after a 3-0 victory at Huddersfield. Strugglers Stoke lost 2-0 at home to Preston. England's cricketers missed a great chance for victory as they slipped to a 1-run defeat to South Africa in the opening T20 match. A quick-fire 70 off 38 balls from Jason Roy, coupled with a 52 from captain Owen Morgan, had put them in a strong position before ultimately falling short. The second match takes place in Durban tomorrow. And Wigan look to bounce back from last week's defeat at Castleford when they return to action in Rugby League Super League this evening. They host newly promoted Toronto. The Canadian side have suffered 2 losses from their first 2 matches in the top flight.
We have, by the way, yesterday was Formula One. Today it's rugby. Hong Kong and Singapore rugby sevens have been postponed on the coronavirus concerns. We'll continue to fill you in on this developing story with our main rugby fan, Leanne Gerrans. Right now I want to get to, though, the U.S. sports report. For that, we go to Pete Fox. Pete?
Basketball in Brooklyn. The Nets have won 4 of their last 5 after a nice win over the Raptors, 101-91, putting an end to Toronto's 15-game winning streak. Karis LeVert with 20. Joe Harris had 19. In New York at Madison Square Garden, Wizards take down the Knicks, 114-96. Bradley Beal with 30. Alfred Payton leading the way for New York with 19 points and 8 assists. And in Phoenix, the Suns, a winner over the Warriors, 112-106. From the NHL scoreboard on the ice in Boston at TD Garden, David Pastrnak netting the hat trick for the Bruins in a 4-1 win over the Canadiens. Goals 39, 40, and 41. I'm Pete Fox. That's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
That was your World Sports Update there with Pete Fox and your European Sports, William Essler. I want to give you a quick look at what you should be watching out for today outside the world of sports. At 10:30 a.m., we'll bring you our interview with Airbus CEO Guillaume Fauré following those fourth quarter results. Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba reports third quarter earnings before the bell on Wall Street, and the Senate Banking Committee holds a Fed nomination hearing. Christopher Waller and Judy Shelton are up for 2 vacant positions on the Board of Governors. Waller is Director of Research at the St. Louis Fed, while Shelton was an advisor to President Trump's election campaign. At 5 p.m. UK time, we're going to hear from South African President Cyril Ramaphosa as he delivers his State of the Nation address. And a rate decision comes from Mexico's central bank. They're expected to cut their key rate to 7%. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, President of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI,
we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Family properties and investments have been passed to the next generation, but while the business has evolved, has your accountant stayed behind? Burden Accountants and Advisors examines the latest business trends, market conditions, and industry issues to maximize your tax advantages and meet your financial goals. Let Burden use their insight to create innovative tax solutions for your family and your business. Visit burdenllp.com to get started. BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
3, 2, 1. Oh no. Which button am I?
When every second counts, you can't wing it.
Guys, a little help up here?
In a home fire, you may have less than 2 minutes to get out. So make a family home fire escape plan. Then practice home fire drills at least twice a year so everyone knows what to do when they hear. Prepare your family at ready.gov/fire drill. Brought to you by FEMA, the Ad Council, and Make Safe Happen.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
3 commodities, metallurgical coal, aluminium and manganese, all slumped last year as the trade war between the US and China crimped demand. Joining us now from Perth is CEO and Managing Director Graham Kerr. Graham, just as we had that phase 1 trade deal, then coronavirus hits the global economy. Can you tell us what kind of implications this has for demand destruction for the quantities that you're in the business of shipping to China? Have you had any requests for force majeure or flexibility in deliveries from Chinese customers so far?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. If you think about where we are, the first half of the financial year for us was a tough year on prices, but interesting enough, the last 2 months we've actually seen increases in most of our commodity prices, and I think that's part of the challenge with the coronavirus is not only the uncertainty surrounding it, but for some commodities it's actually having a positive impact in the short term. You asked a question about have we had any, refusals, letters of credit refusals or turning away of cargoes. At the moment, for the majority of our commodities, the demand is actually still strong. And in fact, there's a preference for some imported ore rather than domestic ore, particularly in manganese and also in met coal, which we see as a positive. Now, the key question for us is how long does that it'll last for, and obviously what comes out the back end as China continues to come out of Chinese New Year.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So coronavirus, close to 60,000 cases, more than 1,300 deaths because of a new way of counting people infected. Capital Economics predicts the virus will put an end to global economic growth quarter on quarter. European stocks open lower, currently down pretty much in all sectors, led by autos and oil and gas. So we're down 0.5%. US futures also lower 0.5%. Stocks in focus, Barclays shares currently down 1.8% on a regulatory probe of Jess Staley after the earnings were also a little disappointing this morning. Credit Suisse shares also down. We heard from the outgoing CEO Tidjane Thiam earlier this morning. In terms of the bond markets, US yields dropped 5 basis points at 1.58%. Chinese companies rushing to issue anti-epidemic bonds with the support of regulators. Meanwhile, in the oil markets, WTI crude oil holding above the 50 threshold. The euro currently trading at 1.0883, so stronger 0.1%, but still weak. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans with all the world news. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. As Matt mentioned earlier, the Hong Kong Rugby Sevens tournament has been postponed on coronavirus concerns. Yesterday, Formula One confirmed it's postponing this year's Chinese Grand Prix. The Chinese Grand Prix and the Rugby Sevens is the latest in a long list of global events cancelled or postponed due to that outbreak. Italy is in danger of missing its its already unambitious growth targets for 2020 because of the coronavirus outbreak. That's according to the Deputy Finance Minister, who raised the alarm during an interview with Bloomberg. The outbreak comes at a difficult time for Italy's economy. Output unexpectedly shrank 0.3% in the final quarter of 2019, ramping up pressure on the fragile coalition government. And Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and TikTok will have to reveal users' identities if Indian government agencies ask them to. That's according to the country's controversial new rules for social media companies, expected to be published later this month. India's new guidelines go further than most other countries. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Thanks very much, Leanne. Now, more than 90% of speculative grade companies in the EMEA region are displaying early warning signs. That's according to a Moody's report that said about 2/3 of the non-financial companies rated by them have weak liquidity and excessive leverage. For more, let's bring into the conversation Richard Moravec, who's a senior credit officer at Moody's Investor Services. Richard, good to speak to you this morning. So how concerned should we be about this canary in the coal mine?
Good morning. Well, we've done an analysis of the speculative grade companies that we rate in EMEA region, and we have, as you've mentioned, identified what we call early warning signs or really risk factors that companies face. There are 17 in total. Inevitably, as you mentioned, because the risk factors that we've identified are very broad in nature, inevitably the majority of companies will display at least one of them, and many of them display more than one. But I think it's important to emphasize that just because a company displays what we call an early warning sign, it doesn't mean that the company is, of course, going to default.
Does this tend to come, do you tend to see this come at the same time, though, many companies starting to default?
Well, we are expecting an increase in the default rate for speculative grade companies this year in EMEA, but that's more a result of the global economic slowdown. In actual fact, the early warning signs that we've monitored have not changed significantly in the recent years that we've been monitoring them.
So would you normally associate this kind of development with interest rates going higher and the ability to pay back debts being threatened by higher rates? We're not seeing that at the moment, are we?
No, we're not. And interestingly, our expectation is that interest rates will remain low, and that's actually not one of the indicators that has been particularly prevalent is interest cover metrics. Companies are benefiting from low interest rates, and if anything, that will help to reduce the number of defaults this year. But our expectations interest rates will remain low, and so that's actually not one of the key concerns right now.
What about the coronavirus? It's canceling events all over the place. Formula One, is something that 500 million people watch. Individual people, that's unique views. Hong Kong Rugby Sevens is a huge event that, hundreds of thousands of people actually travel to and millions watch. This has it seems likely that this will heavily affect the economy and businesses.
Yes, we haven't actually dealt with the virus per se in this report, but I think more generally speaking, and to your point, the extent to which it affects consumer confidence and global growth could and would affect the companies that we have reviewed. But I think at this time, it's still, to some degree, one has to wait to see the extent over the longer period, how much it will affect consumer confidence.
Do you think that the risks to the Eurozone economy are to the downside, though, when we talk about this, Richard? Because we saw European industrial output data really collapsing yesterday, the words of Nomura, not my words, pointing to particularly disappointing performance in the Eurozone. And that was for December. That was before the coronavirus became something that we were talking about as a threat away from the human tragedy, as a threat to global growth.
Well, sure. And we have been seeing negative economic data for some time now, which in a sense is what prompted us to look at these warning signs, because we think that it's appropriate when there is a period of an economic slowdown. But as you say, most of these signs were starting to emerge even before the virus. Clearly, the virus adds to the uncertainty, but the emphasis of our report was really on things that actually preceded the virus.
Is it more of a concern here? I mean, you're looking at the EMEA region, right, than in the U.S.?
Well, we have focused on the EMEA region. As I say, it's a factor of the European economy slowing down, and that I think is the key cause of what we're looking at here.
Richard, thanks very much. Thanks for joining us. Richard Moravec, Senior Credit Officer at Moody's Investor Services. Really interesting to get that analysis. Early warning signs accelerate as the global economy decelerates. And as Richard said there, Matt, a lot of the work here necessarily predates the coronavirus. And so as a result, you wonder where this goes next. But interesting to get his insights into what can be a warning signal for the global economy, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the downside risks are there with the coronavirus. We continue to get more and more headlines on the financial and the economic effects. Right now, Airbus saying it lost a week of production after the virus closed its China site. Many of the CEOs that we talk to, these are big multinational companies. They operate in China, and when they can't do so, it makes a big difference in terms of certainly the bottom line. We'll continue to discuss. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. The coronavirus is affecting Formula One racing. Liberty Media, who owns F1, confirmed it is postponing this year's Chinese Grand Prix racing event in Shanghai due to the coronavirus outbreak. The race was scheduled for April 17th through the 19th. Formula One says potential alternative dates for the event are being considered if the situation improves. Meanwhile, there's word Hong Kong's biggest annual social event, the Rugby Sevens, will be postponed because of the coronavirus. Whoopsie, Target made a onesie mistake. The retail giant is apologizing after the Minnesota-based chain stocked maroon onesies with printed on the front. The problem is the Gophers is the University of Minnesota mascot. The Badgers belong to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, the Big Ten University football rival. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr, brought to you by Marcus by Goldman Sachs. With a high-yield online savings account, you can money. What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
No company wants to be involved in an international dispute. But when disagreements arise, you need expertise at your side. Take a closer look at ICDR, the International Center for Dispute Resolution. Backed by the longevity and strength of the American Arbitration Association, the ICDR is the world's leading provider of cross-border dispute resolution services, handling more cases than any other institution. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org.
Business. Switch to 5G on Vodafone. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G by March 8th and get wireless Galaxy Buds Plus for free. With unlimited 5G data, you can post 108 megapixel photos and download videos impossibly fast. All on the UK's best mobile data network. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
5G subject to coverage in your area. MPerf test awarded Vodafone Best 2019 Mobile Internet Performance. Minimum term applies. See vodafone.co.uk.
This is our story. The Birds of Prey. Yeah. Roman is building an army. He's after all of us. We gotta clean the city from the inside out.
Critics are saying Margot Robbie is brilliant as Harley Quinn.
Hi, boys.
A fantastic assault on the senses. An irresistible riot of popcorn fun. Woo! Brilliantly acted and very funny. 4 stars. Birds of Prey. In cinemas now. Certificate 15.
The UK has now left the EU, and we're in a transition period until the end of the year. Throughout this period, the government will be forging new partnerships with the EU and the rest of the world. This could lead to new arrangements for trade, travel, and business. To find out about the changes and how they might affect you, go to gov.uk/transition.
Give
give same old a shake-up. Give it some gusto. Give your 4-dish repertoire the 40-dish treatment with all the ingredients you need delivered to your door. Give it new flavours to try, like creamy haddock linguine with tomato and chilli. Give everybody a hearty plateful from just £2.98 each. Give it weekly dinners sorted. Go on, give it some gusto. Visit gusto.co.uk today and get 50% off your first box. Subscription auto-renews, cancel anytime.
The Dacia Duster has won what car? Best family SUV less than £20,000 for the second year running. Time to roll out the fanfare. Starting from only $10,995, our prices are pretty modest, just like our celebrations. Visit dacia.co.uk to find out more about our range of award-winning cars. Dacia, you do the maths.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from Bloomberg's Berlin Bureau. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards. It's just gone 9:30 here in London, 10:30 in Paris or Berlin. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
We are seeing increased concerns about the coronavirus today, Anna, as the Chinese have changed their methodology for counting confirmed cases. That raises the number by about 15,000. So up to a total of 60,000 confirmed cases globally, 50,000 in China. And as a result, we see sort of a global equities rout. There are also a lot of earnings reports out today, so keep that in mind. But and some big companies that have gone ex-dividend, BP and Royal Dutch Shell, they weigh on indexes. As a result, you see the FTSE down more than 1% right now, 88 points to 74.46. Other indexes aren't down quite as much, though we do see red arrows across European equity indexes. In terms of futures, we see U.S. futures down about 0.6% on Dow and S&P 500 contracts. NASDAQ futures are down about 0.75%. So really substantial drops there as we get closer and closer to the U.S. Open. Investors are piling into Haven trades. The 10-year Treasury yield is now 1.5814%. You can buy 109.767 Japanese yen for your dollar, and gold is going for 1575.37 a troy ounce right now. We do see the euro trading higher against the dollar at 108.87, as is the pound at 129.74. And with the IEA saying that demand will fall for the first time in a decade on the coronavirus, we see Brent crude down at 55.21 a barrel.
Yeah, and US futures just extending their drop. S&P 500 E-mini futures now down by 0.6%, so we'll keep an eye on that. Let's get back to the corporate news, though, Matt, and our exclusive interview this morning with the Barclays CEO, Jez Staley, after the lender reported fourth quarter results. The headlines mostly focused, though, on the news that the UK's Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, is probing Staley's relationship and what he disclosed about it with Jeffrey Epstein. We asked him about the probe.
It's well known in the press that I have had a long-standing professional relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It began in 2000 when I was asked to run J.P. Morgan's private bank, and he was already a client of the bank at that time. The investigation is actually focused on transparency, of whether I was transparent with and open with the bank and with the board with respect to my relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And indeed, it's clear in my own mind that going all the way back to 2015 when I joined Barclays, I have been very transparent with the bank and very open and willing to discuss the relationship that I had with him. And if you look at the RNS, I think what's important to note is the board has done its own review, and they've looked back at my transparency, and they concluded indeed that I have been transparent and open with the bank and with the board all along this process. And in fact, they have unanimously voted for me to be put up for re-election at the AGM meeting later this year. So full support from the chairman and from the board. But there is a regulatory process that is ongoing, and we'll let that run its course.
Okay. Do you understand, though, or is it the case that new information has come to light on which the FCA has made this decision? Why has the FCA decided to launch this probe at this time?
You know, I'm not going to go into the issues of why the FCA. I mean, clearly there's been obviously a lot of press, but I've been very transparent with the bank all along, and I think the bank has been very transparent to the FCA, and we'll just let the review by the FCA reach its conclusion.
Jess, you were talking about, to get back to the business and really, I think the interest of shareholders here, you were talking about the dividend, and I know you have a plan or at least an aim to supplement dividends with share buybacks if feasible. Is that feasible given the lower for longer interest rate environment that we're reporting on so often?
Yeah, we generate a lot of excess capital, and if you look back last year, we had the one big impediment for us was in the third quarter when we had a charge of close to £2 billion related to the final PPI claims. We have tripled our dividend. We generate a lot of excess capital, and as we've said and we'll continue to say today, we look forward to returning more capital to shareholders, including buybacks. And when we get to the right point in time, we will announce and execute that. Let's see how it goes through the course of 2020.
That was Jess Daly, of course, the Barclays CEO, speaking to us earlier this morning.
Let's get over Leanne Gerrans now.
Yes, let's do that. The latest in world news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans.
Anna, good morning. In China, coronavirus cases have jumped by nearly 15,000 overnight. That's around a 45% increase, but it's mostly down to a new methodology for counting infections. China is removing senior local officials. That's amid deepening concerns about early efforts to suppress information about the severity of the outbreak. The death toll has now passed 1,300. Meanwhile, rising coronavirus cases on board a quarantine ship in Japan, which may be evidence that passengers are spreading the infections to each other, is raising concerns about their safety. Bloomberg's Isabel Reynolds has more.
44 new cases emerged Thursday to make a total of 218. Japan announced it would allow vulnerable passengers, especially those aged over 80 and those with underlying health conditions, to disembark if they test negative and move to government-approved accommodation on shore. That still leaves more than 3,000 people who are likely to have to wait on board the liner in Yokohama until the incubation period is over on February the 19th. In Tokyo, Isabel Reynolds, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Here in the UK, the Prime Minister is reshuffling his cabinet. The Northern Ireland Secretary, Julian Smith, has become the first of Boris Johnson's top team to be sacked this morning. Smith has been praised for helping restore power sharing at Stormont, but on his way into a meeting in the Commons, he admitted the decision was out of his hands. Boris Johnson plans to promote a number of women to government roles. He's facing calls to increase diversity in his cabinet. And in Italy, Matteo Salvini will stand trial for refusing to allow stranded migrants into the country, an outcome he is likely to welcome as migration control is a key campaign platform. Bloomberg's John Verlaine has more.
The Rome Senate gave the go-ahead to a trial for Salvini after he blocked a ship carrying rescued migrants from docking in a Sicilian port last July. Prosecutors charged Salvini, who was Interior Minister at the time, with kidnapping. Salvini says he was applying government policy. A guilty verdict in an initial trial could prevent him from standing as the centre-right bloc's candidate for Prime Minister. In Rome, John Verlaine, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Thanks very much for that, Leanne. Now with your morning sports news, William Essler.
West Brom have moved 6 points clear at the top of the Championship after a 2-1 win at Reading. Fulham missed the chance to go second following a 1-1 draw at Millwall. Luton got just their second win in 12 league games by beating Sheffield Wednesday 1-0. Bristol City held off a fight back from Derby to win 3-2. Cardiff are 4 points off the playoff spots after a 3-0 victory at Huddersfield. Strugglers Stoke lost 2-0 at home to Preston. England's cricketers missed a great chance for victory as they slipped to a one-run defeat to South Africa in the opening T20 match. A quick-fire 70 off 38 balls from Jason Roy, coupled with a 52 from captain Owen Morgan, had put them in a strong position before ultimately falling short. The second match takes place in Durban tomorrow. And Wigan look to bounce back from last week's defeat at Castleford when they return to action in Rugby League Super League this evening. They host newly promoted Toronto. The Canadian side have suffered 2 losses from their first 2 matches in the top flight.
Let's get the U.S. sports report now. For that, we go to Pete Fox. Pete?
Hockey from Boston's TD Garden. The Bruins get back to winning, having won 7 of their last 8 after a 4-1 win over the Canadiens. David Pastrnak with the hat trick, goals 39, 40, and 41. Basketball in Phoenix, Suns down the Warriors, 112-106. Andrew Wiggins put up 27 in the loss. In Brooklyn at Barclays, a nice win for the Nets, 101-91, snapping the Raptors' 15-game winning streak. Karis LeVert posting 20 in the win. Joe Harris added 19. And at the Garden, Knicks fall to the Wizards, 114-96. Washington has won 3 of their last 4. Bradley Beal finishing the night with 30. I'm Pete Fox. That's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
Thanks very much to Pete for that. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we get a take on this morning's earnings as Barclays, Credit Suisse and Nestle all report numbers, some of which missed estimates, but the likes of Orange and Airbus beat estimates. Not all good news for Airbus, though, so more on that with Andrew Sheets, Chief Cross-Asset Strategist at Morgan Stanley. Plenty to digest when it comes to the earnings story. A reminder, you can listen back to a selection of our interviews at BloombergRadio.com or on the Bloomberg Business app. European equity markets sell off today, renewed focus on coronavirus. This is Bloomberg.
I'm a 40-year-old man that walked in there to get his high school diploma. It was very hard for me, but Miss Araceli, she gave me direction.
At age 47, Marco finished his high school diploma.
50% of getting your high school diploma is walking through those doors. The other 50% is doing the work.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology, data with inspiration, investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This is our story. The Birds of Prey. Roman is building an army. He's after all of us. We gotta clean the city from the inside out.
Critics are saying Margot Robbie is brilliant as Harley Quinn.
Hi, boys.
A fantastic assault on the senses. An irresistible riot of popcorn fun. Brilliantly acted and very funny. 4 stars. Birds of Prey. In cinemas now. Certificate 15.
The Dacia Duster has won what car? Best family SUV less than £20,000 for the 2nd year running. Time to roll out the fanfare. Starting from only $10,995, our prices are pretty modest, just like our celebrations. Visit dacia.co.uk to find out more about our range of award-winning cars. Dacia, you do the maths.
Ladies and gentlemen, Maltesers presents If Dating App Chats Were Real Life Chats.
Amber, damn, you hot. Glad we matched.
Me too. You're definitely my type.
I gotta ask, did it hurt?
Oh, I'll see where this is going.
When you fell from heaven, Amber? Yo, Amber, 'cause you're an angel.
Snore. Ditch the apps this Valentine's and swipe yourself some Maltesers.
The B&Q 3-for-2 paint offer is now on. Get an unmissable 3-for-2 on coloured emulsions such as Dulux, Farrow & Ball and Valspar. Don't miss out on this show-stopping deal. Get to B&Q. You can do it when you're 3-for-2 it. Excludes white and ready-mix trade. Every 3rd item per single transaction is descending price order free. Offer ends 24th of February. See DIY.com.
Good morning. This is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What C sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
The 2020 NBA All-Star Game is live on TuneIn Premium. Catch every fast break, fadeaway, and alley-oop as Team LeBron and Team Giannis go head-to-head in Chicago.
Deep 3 and in! Oh, man! 5 to shoot, LeBron long 3. Good!
Which star will shine the brightest? Who will be named this year's MVP? Find out Sunday at 8 Eastern with ESPN Radio's live coverage of the NBA All-Star Game on TuneIn. Search Premium to upgrade today.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So stocks in Europe are sliding on concerns around the coronavirus. We're down 0.6% on the Euro Stoxx 600. Wednesday's optimism, perhaps something of a false start. Capital Economics predicting that the virus will put paid to the global economic expansion that has gone on now for 40 quarters. So the Euro Stoxx 600, as I say, lower. FTSE 100 drops by 1.1% and the Xetra DAX also off by 0.6%. The businesses in focus, Barclays shares currently down 2% on a regulatory probe of Jess Staley and also after earnings, which were a little disappointing. Credit Suisse shares also down, currently 0.5%. We did hear from the outgoing CEO, Tidjane Thiam, also on earnings. Airbus with earnings, their share price drops almost 1%, although of course they did do better than Boeing, which managed no sales for a couple of months. We heard that earlier in the week. In terms of the bond markets, Chinese companies rushing to issue anti-epidemic bonds with the support of regulators. US benchmark yields currently sliding 5 basis points to 1.58%. As for the oil markets, we trade currently on WTI crude futures at $50.80 the barrel, so down 0.7%, a drop of 1.1% for Brent crude. In the FX markets, the euro trading at 1.08, so stronger, 0.1% as the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index slides just a little bit. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne.
Gerrans with all the world news. Morning.
Good morning, Caroline. A stunning report from the Chinese province at the center of the coronavirus outbreak. It's reporting that the number of cases soared by 45% to almost 50,000. That's raising questions about the true scale of the crisis. In recent days, there was hope that the epidemic was easing. The death toll has now risen above 1,300. Today, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa will deliver what has been dubbed the most important State of the Nation address in more than 20 years. An outline of the implementation process to get embattled state-owned companies on a better footing is expected to take center stage. Ramaphosa is also expected to deliver a turnaround plan for the country's loss-making airline, South African Airways. And today is World Radio Day. UNESCO started celebrating the event in 2012 to highlight the importance of the medium. Radio is the most accessible media in the world and can be listened to in any corner of the globe. Marking the day, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in an era of rapid media evolution, radio still has the power to bring people together. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Matt.
Sure brings us together.
Yes, it does indeed. I can't wait until 9 o'clock every day when I've got you and Anna here in the studio.
Leanne, Michelle.
It was almost sincere, Leanne.
It was sincere.
Incredible. All right, I can't wait. I can't wait until 9:50 every day because you know what happens then?
You speak to Nathan Hager.
We bring in Nathan Hager from the United States of America.
I feel
Nathan,
the togetherness.
You
Happy
are preparing
World Radio Day.
Yes, although we don't have great news today. In fact, we have equity indexes that are down across the board. What are you prepping for?
Certainly do. I mean, this has been the story for weeks, right? Worries about coronavirus gripping markets, and it looks like that's what we're seeing again after the number of infections jumped dramatically, with the province at the center of the outbreak changing how it counts the infections. We're going to take a look at this risk-off morning and the market implications of this new method of tracking the outbreak out of China. Plus, we have bank earnings out of Europe this morning with controversies swirling around the CEOs at a couple of those firms. We will hear from Jess Staley and outgoing Credit Suisse chief Tidjane Thiam about the troubles that they're dealing with. And talking about controversy, President Trump's picks to flesh out the Federal Reserve Board get their hearing on Capitol Hill, and to say at least one of them is unconventional, maybe understating things. Join me and Karen Moscow for all that coming up on the radio. Bloomberg Daybreak in the U.S. Matt?
Looking forward to it. Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow coming up next. If you're listening on Sirius XM, channel 119, I have to say, I truly miss a little editorialization here. I truly miss Sirius XM. When I lived in the U.S., I basically lived on that, 119 and channel 23, also one of my favorites. But if you're listening in London, you have digital radio as well, DAB digital radio. There you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Absolutely. Do not move from that channel. Now it's been a banner morning for earnings, hasn't it, Matt? We've been kept busy. We've heard from the CEOs of Nestle, Barclays, the outgoing CEO of Credit Suisse, Tidjane Thiam. Top of the agenda for many of these execs, of course, aside from the idiosyncratic features of their own story, is coronavirus, with Pernod Ricard among those cutting its forecast on concerns the outbreak will hurt sales in China. For more, let's bring in Andrew Sheets, Chief Cross-Asset Strategist at Morgan Stanley. Andrew, good morning. Let's talk about what we know so far and what we don't about coronavirus and the damage it'll do to the global economy. Putting aside, of course, the tragic human plight that this represents, we see an interesting report this morning from the IEA. They see the first global oil demand drop in a decade on coronavirus. They say the global oil demand will drop this quarter for the first time in over a decade. It's a bit of a poster child, I suppose, for the damage that could be done to the global economy. How much of a handle on it do you have?
Well, I think it's really notable how large some of these declines in activity are that we're seeing out of oil demand, out of Korean import data, out of a lot of these indicators, and maybe made even more extreme because the year-over-year comparisons with China New Year are So I think we are looking at something that really will affect a lot of the global data over the next month or two, almost kind of regardless of where these health concerns go. Now, I think for markets, what is key is I could actually see a scenario where over the next month or two, there's more of an willingness to give that data a little bit of a pass because it's expected to be weak and investors could see it as temporary, and that the risk would actually mount then after that. The risk would mount if this has farther reaching effects to the supply chain. Because I think if we look at global markets, I think global markets are priced for a near-term disruption. They're not priced for anything longer than that.
Yeah, it's interesting, Andrew. We're seeing so many announcements from companies that, and we know, they've had to close production facilities. The supply chain has been halted in some cases, and we're seeing huge events postponed. The Mobile World Congress, the Hong Kong, the Rugby Sevens, the Formula One race in Shanghai. You can really see how this would hit demand, and yet equity indexes are at record highs. I mean, even if this is only a temporary effect, if it hurts your quarter or two, why would we see equity indexes still at record highs?
Well, again, I think, that's, I think, a great question, and I think speaks to the willingness for the markets in the near term to still be able to absorb this as it's just one quarter, it's demand that is just going to be pushed back, that this consumption will emerge later, and this idea that central banks will respond to any risk. But again, I think as the year goes on, as you get into May and June, I think some of those assertions look a lot more vulnerable. I think some of this demand, might not come back, right? Once you cancel an event, you might not reschedule it later in the year. I think the idea that it might not just be a one quarter hit to earnings, but a multiple quarter hit to earnings, again, certainly isn't in the price. So, I think as we're thinking about this as affecting the markets, I think, near term, there's more ability, I think, for markets to sail above it. But I think as we look out into May or June, I think I'd be very skeptical about, misreading that strength as something more durable. And I think that we could be setting ourselves up for another year where investors will be incentivized to sell in May and go away.
I don't want to be the bringer of doom, but I feel myself drawn to this particular bit of analysis by one of our colleagues, Gina Martin-Adams, equity strategist in the US, who's reflecting on the fact that we've seen some strong fourth quarter reporting in some cases from some corporates, but that's not translating into increases in estimates for how these companies are going to deliver profits in the quarters to come. So year-on-year EPS estimates are decreasing for the first quarter, especially in commodities, of course. And part of this much of this, I guess, reflects coronavirus. So the earnings season might stand aside from it at the moment, but that won't be the case as we go through the year.
I think that's something also very interesting about the narrative is I think that there's just this assumption that earnings growth is still good, or especially in the U.S. It's still very good, and actually it's not. Earnings growth is about zero year over year for the S&P 500. As you just mentioned, those earnings are generally being revised down, not up, and we actually think those estimates, especially as you move further into the year, kind of the third and the fourth quarter numbers, still look very high. So I think there still is, maybe not immediately, but as you move through the year, still some risk. And we had a note out at Morgan Stanley this morning from our accounting team, and they actually noticed that a lot of the beats over in the fourth quarter were due to tax-related provisions, which certainly helps, but is not necessarily a sustainable thing. And actually, as you look into the fourth quarter of next year, some of those things might actually reverse.
All right, really fascinating stuff. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. If you are tuned in, by the way, on London DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance, and Andrew Sheets is going to join Tom Keene and Francine Lacroix on that program, so you'll get more from him. If not, if you're tuned in somewhere else, you could just turn on the TV and watch him on the television. If you're tuned in on Sirius XM, channel 119, you'll hear Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow on Daybreak Americas. That's it for Anna and myself. Have a fantastic Thursday is the new Friday. This is Bloomberg.
The B&Q 3-for-2 paint offer is now on. Get an unmissable 3-for-2 on coloured emulsions such as Dulux, Farrow & Ball and Valspar. Don't miss out on this show-stopping deal. Get to B&Q. You can do it when you're 3-for-2 it. Excludes white and ready-mix trade. Every third item per single transaction is descending price order free. Offer ends 24th of February. See DIY.com.
Got the ticket, Sergey?
Yep.
Now, what movie are we watch?
Ooh, an adventure.
Oh, where are we?
Ooh, it's a tomb.
Okay, stay close to me, and whatever you do, don't set off any... Oh, booby traps.
Uh-oh.
Sergey, run! Enjoy endless adventures with 2-for-1 cinema tickets from Meerkat Movies when you buy through Compare the Market. Qualifying purchases Tuesdays or Wednesdays. Participating cinemas, 2 standard tickets only. Cheapest ticket free. T's and C's apply.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What C sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking, and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, February 13th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Stocks around the world slide as new cases of the coronavirus soar in China.
Infections jump by 15,000 after officials revise methods for diagnosing the illness.
Treasury yields tumble, gold gains, and oil falls as virus fears hit global markets.
President Trump denies meddling in the Roger Stone case, plus the Senate votes today to limit the president's powers to take military action against Iran. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Knicks head to the All-Star break off a home loss to Washington. The Nets off a big win over red-hot Toronto. Aaron Boone met the media at Yankee spring training.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by SEI. With an operating platform designed to support all major asset classes, diverse strategies, and investment vehicles, SEI is redefining wealth management. Learn more at SEIC.com/IMS.
And global stocks are slumping as concerns over the coronavirus resurface. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 25 points this morning. Dow futures down 217. NASDAQ futures down 89. The DAX in Germany is down 0.8%. So is the CAC in Paris. FTSE 100 down 1.25%. Nikkei 225 in Japan was down 0.1%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong down 0.33%. 10-year Treasury up 16.30 seconds, yield 1.57%. Yield on the 2-year 1.39%. NYMEX crude oil down 0.8% or 41 cents at $50.76 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.5% or $7.50 at $15.79.10 an ounce. The euro 1.0882 against the dollar, and the yen 109.69. Nathan.
Karen, we begin in China with word of 15,000 new cases of the coronavirus. The jump in infections comes as Beijing revises its method for diagnosing the illness. We get the very latest from Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie in Beijing.
They're not just looking at people who've been tested with lab tests. They're now looking at people who have gone through CT imaging scans as well and are showing signs of pneumonia. And they've added those cases to the cases that have been tested with these lab tests. So now you've seen that increase, a 45% increase, 15,000 additional infections. And of course, the number of deaths as well has increased above 1,300 globally.
And it brings the number of coronavirus cases around the world to more than 60,000.
The fallout from the outbreak continues to weigh on business and travel in countries around the world. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the details. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Karen. And we'll start with this headline crossing the Bloomberg from the European Union, saying the coronavirus a key downside risk to its growth outlook. Meantime, the wireless industry canceling its biggest annual event, the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. Hong Kong is keeping schools closed until mid-March. Australia is extending its ban on people entering the country from China. And Hubei province extending its work suspension, while Beijing is firing top officials in Hubei and Wuhan over their handling of the virus. And meantime, Japan confirming 44 more cases of the virus on a quarantine cruise ship, raising the total of infections on the vessel past 200. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thanks. Those 15,000 new cases weighed on market sentiment in Asia overnight. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. The offshore yuan fell 1/3% against the greenback in early Asian trade on the revised number of new cases, despite recent signs of stabilization. Benchmarks in Shanghai and Shenzhen also fell, despite earlier in the session getting close to erasing post-Lunar New Year losses. Elsewhere, the Nikkei 225 was marginally lower at 23,827 points in Tokyo. The Kospi also slightly weaker in Seoul, and Australia's ASX 200 closed higher by 0.2%. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Julia, thank you. The coronavirus is also hitting auto demand in China. Car sales in the country plunged to fresh lows in January as the outbreak kept buyers from showrooms. Sales to dealerships fell 20% for the biggest monthly drop in 8 years. Electric vehicles led the decline with a drop of more than 50%.
Turning to Europe now, we have earnings from Barclays, Credit Suisse, and Commerzbank this morning. Results for Barclays were in line with estimates. At the same time, though, the bank revealed that British regulators are probing CEO Jess Staley's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Staley was one of several bankers whose ties to Epstein came under scrutiny after the disgraced millionaire was arrested on charges of sex trafficking. We spoke with Staley about that relationship in an exclusive interview this morning.
I have been very transparent with the bank. The board has done its own review, and they've looked back at my transparency, and they concluded indeed that I have been transparent and open with the bank and with the board.
Barclays says Jess Staley retains the full confidence of the board. Right now, shares are down about 2% in London.
In Zurich, Tidjane Thiam has delivered his final earnings report as CEO of Credit Suisse. Results were mixed. Numbers from the investment bank and global markets business fell short, while results at the wealth management unit beat estimates. After 4 turbulent years at the helm of Credit Suisse, Tidjane Thiam now exits the bank in the wake of a spying scandal that ended in his removal as CEO.
Fundamentally, I have no major regrets. I mean, we've talked about recent events for which I expressed regret formally, but in the big picture of things, in terms of driving the business forward, the strategy has worked.
And shares of Credit Suisse are down about 0.5% in Zurich.
Meantime, investors seem to like what they're seeing from Commerzbank. The lender reported rising revenue and stronger capital buffers in the fourth quarter. It's also planning more cost cuts. Shares are up about 5% in Frankfurt.
Back here in the U.S., the Federal Reserve is in focus for a third straight day as Jerome Powell exits Capitol Hill. Judy Shelton and Christopher Waller take his place. The Fed nominees answer questions from members of the Senate Banking Committee today. And here with more, Bloomberg's Bob Moon.
A senior member of the committee, Republican Richard Shelby, met briefly with both Trump nominees on the eve of today's hearing. And while Shelby told reporters that Waller is okay and hasn't brought a cloud of dust with him, he warned Shelton she'll face tough questions. She's been an informal advisor to Trump and has spent decades outside mainstream economics with some controversial viewpoints. A single no vote on the banking committee would be enough to block the Shelton nomination, assuming Democrats are united in opposition. Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak.
And Bob, ahead of that hearing, we get the Consumer Price Index for January. Economists forecast it rose 0.2%.
And futures this morning are lower, with S&P futures down about 27 points. Dow futures down 230 and NASDAQ futures down 94. The euro 1.0882 against the dollar. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:07 on Wall Street. Let's bring in Michael Barr for a check of what else is going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. A federal judge rejected Roger Stone's claim that he deserved a new trial because a biased IRS employee sat on the jury that convicted him of lying to help President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, President Trump denied his critical tweets amounted to meddling in his former associate's criminal prosecution. 4 federal prosecutors resigned after the Justice Department reversed a recommendation for a 7 to 9 year prison sentence for Stone. The president was asked whether he would pardon Stone.
I don't want to say that yet, but I tell you what, people were hurt viciously and badly by these corrupt people.
The president called the Mueller investigation a scam. Meanwhile, a growing number of Democratic lawmakers are demanding consequences for Attorney General William Barr for what they consider blatantly unethical behavior. Hawaii Senator Mazie Hirono is among them.
You can't have all these career prosecutors resigning en masse. That should be a signal that things are not right.
Senators will vote today on a war powers resolution that would limit President Trump's power to take military action against Iran. Senators are in support of the measure from both sides of the aisle, including Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah.
This helps demonstrate that it's like many of my legislative proposals. This is one that's neither liberal nor conservative. It's neither Democratic nor Republican. I would add here, this is neither hawkish nor dovish.
Marie Yovanovitch, the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, says the State Department is in trouble. Yovanovitch, who was ousted by President Trump, is accusing senior leaders of lacking moral clarity, policy vision, and leadership skills.
At some point, the once unthinkable will become the soon inevitable, that our allies, who have as much right to act in their own self-interest as we do, will seek out more reliable partners whose interests might not align well with ours.
Yovanovitch made the comments while accepting an award for excellence in diplomacy at Georgetown University last night. Troy Price, the chairman of the Iowa Democratic Party, resigned after overseeing a botched presidential caucus that caused delays and confusion. Iowa State Representative Mark Smith will likely take over as interim chairman. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thank you, Michael. 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, all over spring training, the talk is about the Houston Astros. What they did using trash cans to steal signs as they won the World Series in 2017, and what they may have done using buzzers to nearly win the World Series last fall. They, of course, beat the Yankees in the ALCS. The Yankee manager, Aaron Boone, as spring training began at Tampa, was asked if he's convinced the Astros didn't cheat last fall.
No. I mean, that's certainly one of those great unknowns. And certainly, I've spent time, as I'm sure a lot of people have, wondering all the things that could have potentially been going on. And probably will never know for sure, frankly.
On the brighter side, Boone said he watched his new ace, Garrett Cole, throw 25 pitches in the bullpen. Knicks go to the All-Star break after a tight game at the Garden with Washington. The Wizards pulled away. They won 114-96. The Nets at home beat Toronto 101-91. That's the Raptors' first loss since January 12th. They had won 15 in a row. College hoops, St. John's was 2-9 in the Big East. Seton Hall was 10-1. The Red Storm won 80-69 over Providence. And the Pirates lost at home to Creighton 87-82. Rutgers 16-0 at home, but 1-6 on the road. Scarlet Knights lost at Ohio State 72-66. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashauer. Nathan?
And John, looks like the Super Bowl was a big ratings touchdown for the NFL after all. More than 100 million people did watch on Fox. That was a small increase over last year's ratings, but tens of millions more watched at bars or at a friend's house. And that boosted the total viewership for Super Bowl 54 by 13%. Measuring the audience that watches on someone else's screen is increasingly important to networks as they compete for those ad dollars. 30-second Super Bowl spot cost as much as $5.6 million this year. Futures pointed to a lower open this morning on Wall Street. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Switch to 5G on Vodafone. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G by March 8th and get wireless Galaxy Buds Plus for free. With unlimited 5G data, you can post 108 megapixel photos and download videos impossibly fast. All on the UK's best mobile data network. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
5G subject to coverage in your area. MPerf test awarded Vodafone Best 2019 Mobile Internet Performance. Minimum term applies. See vodafone.co.uk.
This is our story. The Birds of Prey. Yeah. Roman is building an army. He's after all of us. We gotta clean the city from the inside out.
Critics are saying Margot Robbie is brilliant as Harley Quinn.
Hi, boys.
A fantastic assault on the senses. An irresistible riot of popcorn fun. Woo! Brilliantly acted and very funny. 4 stars. Birds of Prey. In cinemas now. Certificate 15.
WW Weight Watchers Reimagined have a new customised weight loss programme, My WW, where no foods are off limit. Just fill out a simple assessment and get matched to a plan that suits you. You love eating carbs, cooking at home or eating out? No problem with this new customised plan. Discover which new My WW plan can make losing weight easier for you. Join now and get 50% off your first 3 months.
Offer ends 8th of February. Subscription fees and conditions apply. Mainland UK only. See website for details.
Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
3 commodities, metallurgical coal, aluminium and manganese, all slumped last year as the trade war between the US and China crimped demand. Joining us now from Perth is CEO and Managing Director Graham Kerr. Graham, just as we had that phase 1 trade deal, then coronavirus hits the global economy. Can you tell us what kind of implications this has for the demand destruction for the quantities that you're in the business of shipping to China? Have you had any requests for force majeure or flexibility in deliveries from Chinese customers so far?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. If you think about where we are, the first half of the financial year for us was a tough year on prices, but interesting enough, the last 2 months we've actually seen increases in most of our commodity prices, and I think that's part of the challenge with the coronavirus is not only the uncertainty surrounding it, but for some commodities it's actually having a positive impact in the short term. You asked a question about have we had any, refusals, letters of credit refusals or turning away of cargoes. At the moment, for the majority of our commodities, the demand is actually still strong. And in fact, there's a preference for some imported ore rather than domestic ore, particularly in manganese and also in met coal, which we see as a positive. Now, the key question for us is how long does that it'll last for, and obviously what comes out the back end as China continues to come out of Chinese New Year.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are falling alongside U.S. stock index futures as officials in China deployed a revised methodology to diagnose the coronavirus, sending the number of confirmed cases soaring. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 27 points this morning. Dow futures down 233. NASDAQ futures down 97. The DAX in Germany is down 1.1%. 10-year Treasury up 16/30 seconds, yield 1.57%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.39%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.8% or 42 cents at $50.75 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.4% or $6.80 at $15.7850 an ounce. The euro 1.0879 against the dollar, British pound 1.2981, and the yen 109.67. And today we're watching for a report on consumer prices at 8:30 Wall Street time, along with a weekly report on initial jobless claims. The Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index out at 9:45. PepsiCo and Expedia among companies scheduled to report earnings today. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. President Trump insists his tweet condemning the original 7 to 9 year recommended prison term for former confidant Roger Stone was not at all interference and denied he had any involvement in the Department of Justice's revision. It comes after 4 federal prosecutors stepped down Tuesday from the Stone case following an abrupt change in sentencing guidelines from the DOJ. Democrats are demanding an investigation. Senators will vote on a war powers resolution introduced by Democrat Tim Kaine that would limit President Trump's power to take military action against Iran. In the NBA, the Knicks lost to the Wizards 114-96. The Nets won, the Warriors lost. In the NHL, the Bruins won. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's 5:19 on Wall Street. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak. Let's get more now on our top story. A big jump in the number of coronavirus cases in China, thanks to a new method for counting them. Bloomberg's John Tucker is following the latest developments and joins us live now. Good morning, John.
Yeah, good morning, Nathan. New cases of coronavirus jumped by 15,000 as Hubei province in China revised its method for counting infections. The total deaths in China have now risen past 1,300. There are now 60,000 cases worldwide. And in the biggest political fallout so far from the epidemic, Communist Party secretaries for Hubei and the city of Wuhan were removed. Meantime, an American who was brought home on a State Department flight from central China has become the 14th person with the infection in the United States. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. This might be the biggest corporate fallout from the coronavirus. It's forced the cancellation of one of the world's biggest tech conferences. The Mobile World Congress in Spain is a no-go after a wave of cell phone and tech giants announced they would not be attending. More on that from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman.
You've had basically every major player who would have been at the conference in Barcelona either pulling out or pressuring the GSMA, the parent company of this MWC conference, to pull out. We saw Sprint and AT&T. Qualcomm was just awaiting this announcement to happen. They're one of the bigger players there. Some of the companies like Samsung and Huawei privately have scaled back which executives they were going to send.
Now, this is the first time the show's been scrapped in its 33-year history. It's a blow not just to the industry, but to the city of Barcelona. Last year's conference brought more than 100,000 people from some 200 countries to the port city. Now, all those hotel bookings and rides to and from the event going to have to be canceled as well. The coronavirus is dealing a blow to China's Phase 1 trade deal with the U.S. That's according to Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin.
Our biggest focus is implementing Phase 1. That, to a certain extent, has slowed down given the virus as expected.
At a hearing before the Senate Banking Committee, Mnuchin says he has discussed the outbreak with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. He says there's no question it's having a significant impact in China, but it's too soon to say what the economic effect will be in the United States. In Europe, it's cabinet reshuffle day in the UK. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is making the first major change to his government since he won the election in December. As Bloomberg's Sebastian Salek reports from our London bureau, it will be a key indicator of his intentions for post-Brexit Britain.
This was expected to be a dramatic shakeout of the top jobs, but protests over the lack of women in the cabinet and concerns about sending powerful people to make trouble on the backbenches appears to have derailed the more radical plans from Number 10 advisor Dominic Cummings. The Chancellor appears to be safe, but both the Defence Secretary and the Attorney General look vulnerable. Downing Street says this will be a promotion of a generation of particularly female talent into junior roles to prepare them for cabinet posts in the years to come. In London, I'm Sebastian Salek, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Sebastian, thank you. Turning to corporate news now. Cisco Systems is predicting revenue will decline this quarter. That forecast has shares of Cisco down more than 4% in early trading. We get more from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
It indicates that corporations are still cautious about increasing spending on their computer networks. It said revenue in the third quarter, which ends in April, will decline 1.5% to 3.5% from the same period a year earlier. Cisco is predicting a second consecutive quarterly revenue contraction, showing that its main business of selling expensive networking hardware is still struggling amid tepid spending by corporations and government agencies. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thanks. And coming up today, we get earnings from about 20 companies in the S&P 500. Kraft Heinz among them. Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky reports investors there will be looking for a path forward.
2019 was a disastrous year for the company, whose products range from ketchup to Philadelphia cream cheese to Jell-O. And CEO Miguel Patricio says securing the company's future depends on streamlining its brands while emphasizing its proven winners. Analysts are forecasting a fourth consecutive quarter of declining revenue as Kraft Heinz deals with fierce competition and declining consumer loyalty to established brands. Earnings are forecast at 68 cents a share. Bloomberg Intelligence predicts the company will try to stabilize its business this year to lay a foundation for growth in 2021. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Larry, thanks. And in high-end real estate news, I should say, the world's richest man may have decided California is the place he wants to be. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has more on Jeff Bezos' move to Beverly Hills, that is.
He reportedly has agreed to pay $165 million for a Beverly Hills mansion on 9 acres, setting a record for Los Angeles area homes. The property, designed for Hollywood film titan Jack Warner in the 30s, was described as a mogul's estate built in Georgian style with expansive terraces and its own 9-hole golf course. Bezos had been shopping for an estate for months, according to agents who were contacted during the search. Even after his marital split, he's worth $131.9 billion, according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, so he probably can afford this home. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ed, thanks. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The early U.S. stock indicators are in the red, pointing to a move lower at the open amid a soaring number of coronavirus cases in China, where officials are now using a different methodology to diagnose the illness. Dow futures down more than 200 points. One by one, big tech names were dropping out of this year's premier wireless industry event over coronavirus concerns, and now for the first time in its 33-year history, the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona has been canceled. Nestle's revenue was slowing in China even before the coronavirus outbreak. While the Nescafé maker says it's too soon to gauge the impact of the coronavirus, Nestle has pushed back its sales growth target. Here in the U.S. today, we get a look at what's happening with retail prices, and Bloomberg spoke to economists who are expecting consumer prices rose slightly in January from the month before. Wall Street turned in new record highs yesterday, with the Dow up 275 points. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see 3 men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention.
Search Jaguar E-Pace.
If you're a growing business, be ready when your big moment arrives. One day, you might need to take an online payment at 4 a.m. for a unicorn cake. Or you might need to take lots of payments due to a surge in demand for duck egg blue paint this spring. Be ready with Barclaycard Business. Sign up before the 3rd of April and get 50% off e-commerce rental or card machine rental for 12 months. Search Barclaycard Business and find offers designed for growing businesses. Barclaycard. We take every payment seriously. Subject to application, financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's, exclusions and contract apply. New UK customers only.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
For up to 50% off selected floors and beds, and up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Despite never having used them, Alison Peartree was not initially a fan of purple bricks.
Because I heard from my uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker they don't have proper estate agents.
But Alison's uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker was wrong. Purple Bricks have experienced local agents ready to sell your home.
Turns out Martin from Purple Bricks was very knowledgeable. And he didn't charge commission. I've even recommended him to my sister's boyfriend's auntie's hairdresser, Sharon.
Purple Bricks. Book your free valuation today.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Learn why the world's most sophisticated advisory firms and broker-dealers rely on Pershing to help them improve profitability, create efficiency, attract talent, and manage risk at Pershing.com.
And we're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Stocks are lower around the world as officials in China deploy a revised methodology to diagnose the coronavirus, sending the number of confirmed cases soaring. As a result, 2 officials have been removed from office in Hubei province. We get more from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis in Hong Kong.
State media say both the Hubei and Wuhan party bosses have been sacked. It comes as Hubei reports 14,840 new confirmed cases, this having to do with a change in methodology. They added cases that were confirmed via imaging scans to the previous method of testing. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Brian, thank you. The fallout from the outbreak continues to weigh on business and travel in countries around the world. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live now with those details. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Nate. The wireless industry is canceling its biggest annual event, the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. Hong Kong is keeping schools closed until mid-March. Australia is extending its ban on people entering the country from China. And the European Union this morning called coronavirus a key downside risk to its growth outlook. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. The coronavirus is also having an impact on the oil market. The International Energy Agency saying global demand will drop this quarter for the first time in over a decade. Checking prices now, NYMEX crude oil is down 0.8% or 42 cents at $50.75 a barrel. Brent is 1.25% at $55.10.
In Europe, Barclays says British regulators are probing CEO Jess Staley's relationship with late financier Jeffrey Epstein. We spoke with Staley about that relationship in an exclusive interview this morning.
The board has done its own review, and they've looked back at my transparency, and they concluded indeed that I have been transparent and open with the bank and with the board.
And Barclays does say Staley retains the full confidence of the board. Right now, shares of Barclays are down more than 2% in London.
And Credit Suisse is lower by 0.2% in Zurich. The Swiss firm reported a bigger than expected pre-tax loss at its investment bank. Its final earnings report was CEO Tidjane Thiam at the helm. And again, futures this morning are lower. S&P futures down 23 points, Dow futures down 201, NASDAQ futures down 81, 10-year Treasury up 15.30 seconds, yield 1.57%. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
Thanks, Karen. It's 5:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is here with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. President Donald Trump denied meddling in his former associate Roger Stone's criminal prosecution, saying that tweets he issued about the case do not amount to political interference. 4 federal prosecutors resigned from the case after the Justice Department reversed a recommendation for a 7 to 9 year prison sentence for Stone. He was convicted of lying to Congress and other charges stemming from the Mueller investigation. The president was asked whether he has learned anything from the impeachment process against him.
That the Democrats are crooked, they've got a lot of crooked things going, that they're vicious, that they shouldn't have brought impeachment.
Lawmakers are calling for Attorney General William Barr to answer questions about the sentencing reversal, especially after the president tweeted his thanks to Barr. 8 Republicans have joined with the Democrats in the Senate to limit President Trump's authority to take military action without congressional approval. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
The springboard for this is military action toward Iran. The resolution introduced by Democratic Senator Tim Kaine would bar U.S. troops from engaging in hostilities against Iran or any part of its government or military unless Congress declared war or specifically authorized the use of military force. So it got the procedural vote. The measure is expected to get final vote today. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell opposes the resolution but can't block a vote. The president says this is not the time to show weakness to Iran. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Senator Bernie Sanders' strong showing in Democrats' presidential contest in Iowa and New Hampshire is worrying members of the party that moderate Democrats could be scared by a socialist agenda. Sanders says his campaign is a coalition that wants to change America.
We are taking on Trump, the Republican establishment, Carville, and the Democratic establishment. But at the end of the day, the grassroots movement that we are putting together of young people, of working people of color, want real change.
The chairman of the Iowa Democratic Party resigned after overseeing a botched presidential caucus. Troy Price will likely be replaced by an interim chairman, State Representative Mark Smith. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on a quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's 5:35 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, as Yankee pitchers and catchers reported to work in Tampa, Aaron Boone met the media, was asked right away, and for the first time, his reaction to the Houston Astros sign-stealing scandal.
Mad, frustrated, disappointed, but you also know there's a time to move on, and there's, I don't really dwell on the things that I don't really am able to control. So I look at it now as it's time to move on and look forward.
Boone was not the manager when the Astros stole signs against the Yanks in the 2017 ALCS, but he was last fall, and many believe the Astros were still cheating using buzzers, though baseball says it found no evidence. Boone yesterday watched his new ace, Garrett Cole, throw 25 pitches in the bullpen. Knicks and Nets head to the NBA All-Star break. The Knicks at 17-38. They lost at home to Washington, 114-96. The Nets with one of their best wins of the season, 101-91, cooling off red-hot Toronto, who came in with a 15-game winning streak. Brooklyn 25-28, 7th place in the East. Top 2 in the West met, and the Lakers won in Denver's LeBron James had 33 points, 12 rebounds, and 14 assists. Seton Hall leads the Big East, but lost at home to Creighton, 87-82, while St. John's, who'd been struggling, beat Providence, 80-69. And in the Big Ten, Rutgers fell at Ohio State, 72-66. Tiger Woods tees off this afternoon at the Genesis Golf in L.A. For the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. It's 5:37 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now with the cover on the economic impact from the coronavirus outbreak. Peter Coy wrote the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
There are a lot of ways in which this could turn really sour, and the obvious one is that the virus is less containable than predicted.
We can read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go. Listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio. Watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device. Just visit youtube.com and search Bloomberg Global News. It's just before 5:38 on Wall Street. Now time for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey. Good morning, Ed.
Morning, Nathan. The renovation of JFK continues. A makeover for Terminal 4 will include 16 new gates for domestic narrow-body aircraft. That expansion would allow Delta Airlines to consolidate its JFK operations into one building. The new gates will be added onto the A concourse in the current T4 structure. New Jersey drivers who've purchased or leased an electric car on or since January 17th can get up to $5,000 back. NJ Spotlight says the offer makes the state one of the best places in the country to buy or lease an electric vehicle. Some of the cheapest models have a sticker price of $30,000 to $40,000. Connecticut has launched a mobile app for riders of the Sea Trail Hartford line and the Shoreline East. It allows them to buy tickets for the respective rails using their smartphones. Passengers can buy tickets using a credit card or debit card and then store them on their device. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
All right, Ed, thank you. Almost 5:39 on Wall Street now. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Steve Podoskan on KNX in Los Angeles. We're talking about Tesla planning to build a heavier version of the Model 3 vehicles it now makes in China.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KTRH in Houston. The International Energy Agency sees oil demand dropping this quarter for the first time in a decade.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and on WBBM in Chicago, I'm reporting that a former United Airlines executive has raised $125 million for a new budget carrier.
I'm Tom Busby, and on WTIC in Hartford, I'll be reporting on the U.S. Education Department now investigating Yale for taking money from China, Saudi Arabia, and other countries.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting China car sales have hit new lows as the coronavirus spreads.
And those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. And speaking of car sales, Nissan has cut its full-year outlook for the second quarter in a row. The Japanese automaker also scrapped its year-end dividend, raising questions about the company's ability to return cash to investors. Nissan's top shareholder is its French partner, Renault. The bull market is creating plenty of millionaires, I should say. According to Fidelity Investments, there is now a record number of people with $1 million or more in their 401k or individual retirement account. The total is roughly 441,000 as of December 31st. That's up 17% from the previous quarter. Futures pointing to a lower open on Wall Street. S&P futures are down 24 points right now. Dow futures down 209. NASDAQ futures a loss of almost 85 points. This is Bloomberg.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/Cs.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
All right, Stan, will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
TSB's Fix and Flex loan offers one of the best rates you can get. 2.9% APR representative fixed for up to 5 years. On loans from £7,500 to £25,000. Subject to status, UK residents only over 21. Based on de facto data, January 2020.
Where are we?
The New Forest.
But I thought we only had the Mini Countryman booked for a test drive. We can't stay here.
We're not going to.
This isn't exactly what I meant.
Relax. With Mini's new 48-hour test drive, you can use the Countryman for exactly what it's built for. Exploring. Plus, it's an SUV, the largest Mini in the range, so you can pack loads more in.
Great. Where next?
Well, you know how you've always wanted to try kayaking?
The Mini Countryman 48-hour test drive. Visit mini.co.uk to book yours. Mini. Who's in? Test drive subject to status and availability. Terms and conditions apply. Participating Mini retailers only. Rita's Rowdy Enchiladas.
Every time the kids are together, it's always the same. Never a moment's peace. Didn't take me long to work out the trick, though. Shredded chicken and black bean enchiladas with lime, oregano, and my little secret. A bit of smoke and spice with chipotle paste. Hear that? Never failed yet.
Make your own Rowdy Enchiladas with Tesco British Chicken. Food Love Stories, brought to you by Tesco.
News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
China has replaced the head of its cabinet office responsible for Hong Kong following anti-government protests and rising tensions over the outbreak of coronavirus. The virus has killed over 1,300 people. Attorneys for the man accused of killing 22 people at a Walmart store in El Paso, Texas last year have pleaded not guilty on his behalf. Attorney David Lane spoke following yesterday's court appearance.
All I can say is we are starting this process. Our job is to protect your constitutional rights as well as that of the accused. We are going to do everything in our power to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. Attorney
General William Barr is about to face some of his harshest critics in Congress. Barr has agreed to testify before the House Judiciary Committee. The appearance comes as questions swirl about whether Barr intervened in the case of Roger Stone, a longtime ally of President Trump. I'm John Trout.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow.
Is that good for American finance? What is happening with the headcount?
Right, where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are falling alongside U.S. stock index futures as officials in China deployed a revised methodology to diagnose the coronavirus, sending the number of confirmed cases soaring. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 26 points, Dow futures down 226, NASDAQ futures down 91. The DAX in Germany's down 1.1%. 10-year Treasury up 14.30 seconds, yield 1.57%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.40%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.7% or 35 cents at $50.82 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.4% or $6.40 at $15.78 an ounce. The euro 1.0882 against the dollar, British pound 1.2983, and the yen is at 109.69. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, Democratic lawmakers say President Trump is using the Justice Department as a political tool. It comes after 4 lawyers who prosecuted Roger Stone quit the case. The Justice Department overruled them and said it would lower the amount of prison time it would seek for President Trump's longtime ally. The chairman of the Iowa Democratic Party resigned yesterday after overseeing a botched presidential caucus that led to days of confusion, chaos, and anger as campaigns and voters waited for the final results. Troy Price will be likely replaced by an interim chairman, State Representative Mark Smith. In the NBA, the Knicks lost to the Wizards 114-96. The Nets won, the Warriors lost. In the NHL, the Bruins won. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thank you. It is now 5:49 on Wall Street. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. And good morning, I'm John Tucker. In China today, we have word of 15,000 new cases of the coronavirus. There are concerns over these new cases showing up in financial markets as well. Let's get the update now. We're joined live from Hong Kong with Bloomberg's Rishad Salamat. Rishad, good morning to you. It would appear on the surface, at least, that China, the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak, was undercounting the number of cases.
Yeah, John, I mean, what it is here is essentially a different methodology that they're using. They're using a 2-stage process, and that has resulted in this massive 15,152 additional cases. Now, this is all down to Hubei province, which is the epicenter of what's happening at the moment. And this is, of course, the bulk of the additions coming from there as well. Death toll up to rising by about 254 here as well. So the fatality rate at the moment in the mainland has come to 1,367. And the latest we have in terms of financial markets, we had an employee of Mitsubishi UFG Financial Group here in Hong Kong quarantined at home here in Hong Kong. That after a family member was suspected of being infected by this pathogen here. You know, the thing is, we get news every day, and we did have this sense that perhaps we could see a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And that was really the sort of feeling one was getting yesterday. It seems to have gone away a bit, but how much is this down to a bit more transparency, perhaps? And that's only going to be a good thing, John, isn't it?
I wonder the political fallout and if President Xi is feeling any pressure. Certainly underlings have been replaced right now. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got at the moment 2 officials. This is the biggest move yet in terms of actually, I suppose, firing some of the people who have been allegedly covering up, perhaps not actually being as transparent as they should do as well. And the move did come within, 5-6 hours of each other, with health authorities revealing the cases in the Hubei province, which had surged, as we were just talking about as well. Then they announced the replacement of the 2 most senior Communist Party officials in that province and its hard-hit capital, Wuhan. And we've already got a Shanghai mayor, Ying Yong, who is a former top judge, named to replace the embattled provincial boss there of Hubei province. So the thing is, ever since we had the death of that 31-year-old doctor, Li Lianling, we've had a lot of netizens going on in various forms of social media and criticizing the government itself. So no doubt they have to be seen to be doing something, but are they actually really doing something is always the question, isn't it?
Rashad, can you give us an update on the economic impact so far? We saw this morning that headline crossing the Bloomberg from the European Commission, singling the coronavirus outbreak as what they termed a key downside risk.
Absolutely. I mean, again, John, further dampening the outlook for European economic growth. I think the Commission did come out and say that the economy there remains on a steady path. It's taking into account baseline assumptions, but the ECB already on alert over newly emerged threats. Spanish policymakers there as well adding to this chorus of officials saying that this virus is ultimately compounding risks for the region as a whole. But not just the Commission. I mean, we've got other people out there as well. I mean, take, for instance, the International Energy Agency, the IEA. It's seen the first global oil demand drop in a decade. Previously, we were expecting oil consumption, so they were fuel consumption to grow by 800,000 barrels a day during this quarter compared to a year ago. Instead, they're suggesting it's going to contract by 435,000 a day. So there you go. That gives you an idea of less fuel being used. We've already had reports actually in the Bloomberg exclusive that something like 20% of oil consumption in China itself may well be curtailed in this quarter, all down to the ravages of this pathogen.
Rich, thanks a lot. Always a pleasure. Bloomberg's Rashad Salama joining us with the update live from Hong Kong. Karen.
John, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. It's brought to you by American Arbitration Association. Business disputes are inevitable. Resolve faster with the American Arbitration Association, the global leader in alternative dispute resolution for over 90 years. More at adr.org. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning with Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
International talks to prevent a global tax war are continuing. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin reiterated the UK will not collect revenues from its proposed digital services tax this year. A court complaint against Amazon says the internet retail giant halted a third-party sale of a puppy sleep aid after being told the device infringed on 2 patents, even though neither patent was enforceable. The EPA has registered 11 products that can disinfect surfaces against drug-resistant fungal infections that officials call an urgent threat.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. Guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal story. We're watching a stunning rebuke to the Justice Department for federal prosecutors resigning from the Roger Stone case after DOJ reversed a recommendation for a 7 to 9 year prison sentence for Stone, who was found guilty of lying to Congress, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. The move followed a tweet by President Trump criticizing the sentencing recommendation. For more on this development, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks with former federal prosecutor Robert Mintz, a partner at McCarter & English.
Have you ever seen an entire team of prosecutors resigning due to interference from senior officials?
I think this is really unprecedented. One of the absolute bedrock principles of the justice system in our country is the belief that every defendant will have their fair day in court and that prosecutors will pursue cases based upon whether or not they believe a crime has been committed without any interference from any kind of political outside influences. And what we've seen here is a situation where, regardless of which side of this case you come down on, the fact is that there is the appearance of outside influence by the White House that has put pressure on the Department of Justice. Whether or not that's true, whether or not the president's tweet occurred after the decision was made is really irrelevant. There's just an appearance here that this case is being handled in some way outside of the mainstream channels of the Department of Justice, and the recommendation for sentencing here is being made for reasons other than what the law requires. Frankly, the optics of this are just terrible for the Department of Justice.
As a former prosecutor, how does a sentencing recommendation work in a high-profile case like this? Would the line prosecutors have consulted senior officials in DOJ before making their initial recommendation of 7 to 9 years?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because people on the outside don't necessarily understand how these decisions are made. So what happens here in most cases, and what happened in this case, is that the line prosecutors, the prosecutors who live with the case night and day and who actually prosecute the case through trial, make a recommendation as to what they think is an appropriate sentence. That has to be approved up through the ranks of the U.S. Attorney's Office, and in this case, the U.S. Attorney in the District of Washington, D.C. approved the recommendation. But in a very high-profile case like this, it's not at all uncommon for sentencing recommendations to be reviewed by senior officials in Main Justice in Washington, D.C. The line prosecutors clearly had the approval of the U.S. Attorney, which is usually the only approval you need for a final sentencing memorandum. There was some consultation with Main Justice. Where exactly that went off the rails, it's impossible to say at this point, but the fact is that that sentencing memorandum was delivered to the court. It was backed up by law and facts and recommended a particular guideline sentence, and now the Department of Justice is walking it back in a way that gives the appearance that there was outside political influence that affected the decision.
And that's Robert Mintz, a partner at McCarter & English, speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview, plus analysis of the latest legal news, by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. And futures this morning are lower, with S&P futures down 24 points, Dow futures down 212, NASDAQ futures down 83. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL. Every journey matters.
This is our story. The Birds of Prey. Roman is building an army. He's after all of us. We gotta clean the city from the inside out.
Critics are saying Margot Robbie is brilliant as Harley Quinn.
Hi, boys.
A fantastic assault on the senses. An irresistible riot of popcorn fun. Woo! Brilliantly acted and very funny. 4 stars. Birds of Prey. In cinemas now. Certificate 15.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids' places subject to limited availability. 1 free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, February 13th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Stocks around the world slide as new cases of the coronavirus soar in China.
Infections jump by 15,000 after officials revise methods for diagnosing the illness.
Treasury yields tumble, gold gains, and oil falls as virus fears hit global markets.
President Trump denies meddling in the Roger Stone case, plus the Senate votes today to limit the president's powers to take military action against Iran. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Knicks head to the All-Star break off a home loss to Washington. The Nets off a big win over red-hot Toronto. Aaron Boone met the media at Yankee spring training.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York. Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 106.1 Boston. Bloomberg 960 San Francisco. Sirius XM 119. And around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Global stocks are slumping as concerns over the coronavirus resurface. We're coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down about 25 points this morning. Dow futures down 219. NASDAQ futures down 86. The DAX in Germany's down more than 1%. So is the CAC in Paris. The FTSE 100 down 1.5%. 10-year Treasury up 14.30 seconds. Yield 1.57%. Yield on the 2-year 1.40%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.6% or 30 cents at $50.87 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.4% or $5.90 at $15.7750 an ounce. The euro 1.0873 against the dollar. The yen 109.70. Nathan.
Karen, we begin in China with word of 15,000 new cases of the coronavirus. This jump in infections comes as China revises its method for diagnosing the illness. We get the very latest from Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie in Beijing.
They're not just looking at people who've been tested with lab tests. They're now looking at people who have gone through CT imaging scans as well and are showing signs of pneumonia. And they've added those cases to the cases that have been tested with these lab tests. So now you've seen that increase, a 45% increase, 15,000 additional infections. And of course, the number of deaths as well has increased above 1,300 globally.
And that brings the number of coronavirus cases around the world to more than 60,000.
The fallout from the outbreak continues to weigh on business and travel in countries around the world. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the details. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Karen. The wireless industry is canceling its biggest annual event. That's the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. The European Union this morning called coronavirus a key downside risk to its growth outlook. Hong Kong is keeping schools closed until mid-March. Australia is extending its ban on people entering the country from China. Hubei province is extending its work suspension, while Beijing is firing top officials in Hubei and Wuhan over their handling of the virus. And meantime, Japan is confirming 44 more cases of the virus on a quarantine cruise ship, raising the total of infections in the vessel past 200. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thanks. The 15,000 new cases in China weighed on market sentiment in Asia overnight. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us now from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. The offshore yuan fell 1/3% against the greenback in early Asian trade on the revised number of new cases, despite recent signs of stabilization. Benchmarks in Shanghai and Shenzhen also fell, despite earlier in the session getting close to erasing post-Lunar New Year losses. Elsewhere, the Nikkei 225 was marginally lower at 23,827 points in Tokyo. The Kospi also slightly weaker in Seoul, and Australia's ASX 200 closed higher by 0.2%. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. The coronavirus is also hitting auto demand in China. Car sales in the country plunged to fresh lows in January as the outbreak kept buyers from showrooms. Sales to dealerships fell 20% for the biggest monthly drop in 8 years.
Turning to Europe now, we have earnings from Barclays and Credit Suisse this morning. Results for Barclays were in line with estimates. At the same time, though, the bank revealed that British regulators are probing CEO Jess Staley's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Staley is one of several bankers whose ties to Epstein came under scrutiny after the disgraced millionaire was arrested on charges of sex trafficking. We spoke with Staley about that relationship in an exclusive interview this morning.
I have been very transparent with the bank. The board has done its own review. And they've looked back at my transparency, and they concluded indeed that I have been transparent and open with the bank and with the board.
And Barclays says Jess Staley retains the full confidence of the board. Right now, shares are down about 2% in London.
In Zurich, Jean Thiam has delivered his final earnings report as CEO of Credit Suisse. Results were mixed. Numbers from the investment bank and global markets business fell short, while results at the wealth management unit beat estimates. After 4 turbulent years at the helm of Credit Suisse, Jean Thiam now exits the bank in the wake of a spying scandal that ended in his removal as CEO.
Fundamentally, I have no major regrets. I mean, we've talked about the recent events for which I expressed regret formally, but in the big picture of things, in terms of driving the business forward, the strategy has worked.
And shares of Credit Suisse are down about 0.5% in Zurich.
And back here in the U.S., we have results from Pepsi crossing the Bloomberg. Earnings and revenue topped estimates.